I'd like to call the October 2nd Town Council meeting to order. Please stand to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. First, I'd like to announce that Councilman Moretti is out of town and is unable to be here tonight. I have a couple of moments of silence. I'd like to take a moment of silence for Mark Gunning, who is a special education teacher at the Narragansett High School. He was a member of Rhode Island College in the Sherlock Center. He dedicated his life for inclusionary purposes for students with disabilities. So let's take a moment of silence to remember Mark and his work. Thank you. I'd also like to take a moment of silence for all the lives that were lost in Las Vegas, 59 people, and all the people that were harmed. So we take a moment of silence for the loved ones and the loss of those people. Thank you. On a lighter note, I just wanted to report out to the, we had a wonderful event at St. Thomas More. And I just wanted to thank the police department and the chief and all of the people that were involved in making the Pio Padre event a success. It was a wonderful opportunity, so thank you, chief, and to the fire department for their work and making sure that everybody had a wonderful time down there, so thank you very much. First order of business is the approval of the minutes, August 21st, 2007, for the work session. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. Approval of the minutes for August 28th, 2017, executive session.
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. September 5th, 2017, the work session. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. And we're going to pull the September 5th executive, and we'll review them on October 16th. But we'll do the regular meeting on the September 5th. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. All right, so the executive session for September 5th will be on the next meeting. All right, the next order of business is the showcase. We have a proclamation for a very special woman, for Wayne Douglas. So I'm going to come to the podium. If Wayne, you want to come up?
Good, and you? Yeah. 3 years. What? How many years were you on the commission?
I was safe.
4? Okay, all right. Yeah. Yeah, we'd like to thank Wayne for 4 years of truly dedicated service to the Historic District Commission. Wayne would call me sometimes daily with things that are going on in town, a very heartfelt concern of hers for our architecture in the town. And, you know, she has had to now resign because of personal reasons. And as serious as they are, I think her biggest concern was having to leave the organization. So very, very dedicated over the years.
And if the Historic Commission would like to come up and stand up here with Wayne. Wayne, come on up on this side so everybody in the audience can see you too.
These are the hard-working ones.
Yeah, come on up and face this way so everybody can see you, okay? Yeah, face out so they can see you. Anybody else from the commission here? No? And before I read the proclamation, Wayne, I just want to, on behalf of the town, thank you very much for your service and all your hard work in the Historic Commission. We have enjoyed having you there, and I know you've been invaluable to that commission, so thank you for your work.
It's been a privilege.
Hi. Okay, so we have a proclamation for Wayne tonight, and it's a proclamation recognizing Wayne Douglas. Whereas Wayne Douglas has served on the Narragansett Historic District Commission since May 19, 2014, first as an alternate, then in May of 2015 as a full member. And whereas Wayne Douglas has been extremely valuable and a contribution to her Historic District Commission reviews relative to landscaping and aesthetics. And whereas, with the focus on the Boone Street area, Wayne has been instrumental in bringing forward the expansions of the Historic District zones. And whereas, participation in and committed to her community has always been a goal for Wayne. And whereas Wayne Douglas, as a landscape architect, provided pro bono work on churches, parks, and schools. And whereas, before moving to Narragansett, Wayne served as a member of the planning board in the township of Lawrence, New Jersey for 4 years. Now, therefore, we, the town council and the town of Narragansett, do hereby extend our sincere appreciation and thanks to Wayne G. Douglas for her service to the community, and highly commend her for the manner in which she has carried out her duties and responsibilities. So congratulations, Wayne, and again, thank you. And we're just going to take a 5-minute break so she can do a photo, and thank you so much.
Nice job, Susan.
Thank you.
And I'm not just sucking up to you, 'cause I don't suck up to anybody, you know that. You fit right into the job.
Oh, you think so?
Too bad you're gonna beat out Manning for Lally seat. We'll be stuck with him.
Where did he go?
Yep. Okay. Where's Mannix's mom? She must be a cat person.
It's so funny because I love this period of time, and like the beach, like my dogs and the dogs. We have dogs, Lori Kelly. I swim with my dog.
And look who she's.
Let me tell you, I'm great with her.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting back to order. Thank you. Next, we have a presentation by Sharon Gold, and I just want to give a little introduction to Sharon. Sharon is a South Kingston resident. She is person that cares deeply about the environment. She's a member of the Citizens Climate Lobby. She was a coach at Johnson & Wales, and she spoke to the Congress about impact on greenhouse gases and the possibility of implementing a carbon-free and dividend policy. And so tonight, she's going to give us a very short presentation. She can come to the podium, Sharon, and she's just going to give us a presentation for about 5 to 7 minutes. So thank you for being here, Sharon.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Keeping with the theme of preservation, I think in terms of the environment, the air quality. As part of being a lobbyist in Washington, I think about where I live, which is South County, and a big thing for me is carbon pollution. And what I see continuously are people that sit in their cars needlessly and idling, and very often it's just a question of a habit, whether you're texting or you're speaking to somebody on the phone, you're basically polluting and adding a lot of carbon emissions. Carbon, as you know, is one of the greenhouse gases. One of my initiatives in Rhode Island is I will be giving a series of workshops on the effect of climate change and health. And climate change is not something that's just happening on an iceberg with a polar bear. There are so many cases right here in Rhode Island, from rise of insect-borne diseases to allergy to asthma. And one of the chief greenhouse gases is carbon monoxide. And one of the things, and just a couple of facts, 1 minute of idling puts more CO2 in the environment than actually 3 packs of cigarettes. There was an article that was in the August 30th Narragansett Times, where I'm on the front page, where I actually started this initiative locally to speak to 25 to 30 drivers a week, just to spend 30 seconds telling them that the importance of not idling their cars. So my goal here, and I don't want to go through all statistics, is to basically raise public awareness in the town of Narragansett. I'm trying to do it in South Kingston, to establish idle-free zones. I'm working with 2 superintendents on your recommendation. I'm meeting with Dr. Cummings in 2 weeks to how we can work through the schools with this. I'd like to see possibly a resolution passed, not just for carbon fee and dividend down the road, but for car idling. I see a lot of Rhode Island maintenance men, whether it's South Kingston, Warwick, basically sitting on the road, and you're talking about money spent, pollution, and wear and tear on the automobiles. All of these things can be eliminated. I've done my homework, and I want to leave with the council. Number one, there's a law that exists. It's been on the books since 2007, but it doesn't seem to be enforced. And it's a law regarding air pollution and 5-minute limitation of diesel engines, not more than an hour, within 5 minutes. And so I just wanted to make you aware this does exist. The other thing is I have been in touch with police precincts, municipalities throughout the United States, and I've left a couple of articles on various idling reduction technologies, whether it's ambulances that have to sit and idle. Some states have an electric grid where they can actually charge and not idle. I've been in touch with Kelly Regan, in charge of 6,400 cars in the city of Columbus, Ohio, where he has installed anti-idling devices on police cars, ambulances. They exist in many forms, many shapes. I would be more than happy to become a resource because I've done my homework on this. Some are more effective than others. They save money, they save gas, they save wear and tear, and more they reduce greenhouse gases considerably. And I moved to Rhode Island in 1995 because I love South County, and it's all about preservation, not just buildings. Houston and Miami is a reality. And if you think it can't happen here, it can most definitely happen. I work with the School of Oceanography as well. We study carbon, and I hope something positive happens. And thank you. Who can I
Thank
leave
you.
this with?
Yeah, you can leave them with the clerk. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to open forum. If you come to the mic, please state your full name and your address. Is there anybody that would like to speak at open forum? Mr. Gardner.
Hi, I'm Bill Gardner, 40 Kinney Avenue. I wanted to speak a little bit about the beach and the parking situation. I've been sort of following it in the paper, and originally I was going to try to make a logical presentation about, what was happening, how fiscally we're going to be hurting the town by decreasing tourism, which is the enabling feature of our low tax rate. I was going to talk about how it's going to hurt jobs because we're going to have less people wanting to come to the town. If you look at Yelp and Travel Advisor, the major complaints are about the unfriendliness related to parking. I was going to talk about how it's legally inconsistent with the Rhode Island Constitution, because not only as Rhode Island citizens do we have the right to the shore, but Narragansett Beach specifically has a condition on the right-of-way through the south parking lot that was enabled so that the town could finance the maintenance of the beach. And that's where we have that time restriction till 6 p.m. So it's inconsistent, it doesn't economically make sense. And the parking is not only about the beach. There was a comment about taking over, the spot at Sprague Bridge. And it was that kayakers were okay, but people that didn't have kayak racks were unwelcome. How about if that's somebody that's retired from Metatuxet and wants to go to walk on the seawall and they park there? Are we looking at everything and how this impacts the citizens of Narragansett and the state? But then I wanted to switch it up at the last minute, because with all the stuff that's happened over the last few days, I was up in Providence at the TED Talks, and at the same time was the whole pink out with the Gloria Jammer. And so the TED Talks were about these people that overcame things in their lives and they went on to succeed. And then you saw all these people at the breast cancer event, and they were lining the water and they were enjoying it, and there were people of all different walks of life, and you realize that water and access to it is a good thing. And then I thought about my own time at the beach and the time I spent with my cousins and the time down here. And I know...
Mr. Gardner, you got to wrap it up.
I will. And I remember the sign that says, "A bad day at the beach beats a good day at the office." And what we're trying to do is perfect a spot for people to have a blanket. And we will
Thank you.
ruin the days of other people.
Thank you.
And I hope that's not on your shoulders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak? Bill? State your full name and your address.
Hi, Bill Sinwalt, 30 Eagles Nest Terrace, Narragansett. I wrote all of you over the weekend about my concern on the proposal to eliminate non-resident passes, seasonal passes for the beach. Since then, I got an email from Steve Wright that seems to address my particular problem. That said, I'd like to follow this till its conclusion, and I'd like to know, when is this matter going to come before the council again, and what's the process for that? Is there a schedule?
So we had a workshop and we built consensus on the recommendations, and I'm not sure, he's not here tonight, but a formal vote will probably come soon. I mean, we heard the workshop, we generally had a consensus, but it will be voted on publicly. Probably, I would say in the next month or two. I mean, we finished it. November.
Sometime in
I think he
November,
said November
the
16th or
council will
something.
address the
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah,
Again, all right, thank you very much.
you're welcome, Bill. Come on up.
It must be environmental night tonight. The
Can
Friends
you
of
state your
Canarsie-
name and address for the record?
Kathy Kelleher, 74 Strathmore Street.
Thank you, Kathy.
The Friends of Canarsie Farm has many volunteers. Our volunteer year runs from October of 2016 to September of 2017. In that time period, 66 people have worked 682 hours on our trail. 37 people have worked 374 hours around the ponds. These people were Master Gardeners and Friends of Canarsie Farm members. In addition, URI students volunteered many, many hours. The URI women's bowling team provided 99 volunteers split between 2 dates, and they worked a total of 396 hours. 11 URI conservation biology students worked 44 hours. 10 Alpha Phi Omega members worked for 40 hours. The total number of hours that volunteers have worked this year alone is 1,536. The number of volunteers for this year were 223, and I am proud of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all those volunteers. Thank you, Kathy. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Good evening. My name is Josh Edenbaum. I live at 41 Marion Avenue. I became known of something last night that I saw on social media about the town of Narragansett changing the ordinance for
Okay,
dogs
that's on
the
the,
beach.
that's on the agenda,
But
so
is,
you,
this is not, I cannot speak about
yeah,
that now?
it's on the agenda. You can speak when the item comes up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Stanley?
Yeah, Stanley, you're a cat person, right?
Go ahead. State your name and your address.
I'm not sure what I am at this point. Stan Wojciechowski in Narragansett. I just want to bring up an issue. At many meetings, people come up here and they seem to present that the landlords and renters are not very nice people. You know, we need to change the demographics of this town, get rid of these landlords and renter families. You know, this dislike of the renters and landlords is almost reached, because it's going on so long, it's almost reaching a hate stage, you know? You feel that when you walk in here. You know, so I thought tonight what I'd do is I'd try to bring out a love stage for the landlords and tenants of this town. Let's discuss the love side. And I'll bring up first about a tenant. Shouldn't we love the tenant? I have a tenant, 15 years. I told you many times, Vietnam veteran, never caused any trouble. We should love this man. He's done wonderful things for our country, and he's caused us no trouble. So there's a tenant who we should love. Therefore, not all tenants should be disliked and trying to rid them from the town. So that's one issue. The other one, of course, is landlord. So shall we dislike and hate these landlords? Get them out of town. Well, I want to tell you about a landlord. She's been around, she was renting to this Vietnam veteran for over 15 years. And for over 15 years, you've raised taxes. You've raised taxes on the domicile that he was living in. But this landlord, she did not raise his rent at all, not one penny. She went to the bank and she took out the money to pay the increase that was there. So I guess the landlord's pretty good, 15 years, never raising the rent. So I want you to consider that, you know, not all these landlords and tenants, ugly people, and we ought to consider just presenting a dislike of people. We're all equal, and I don't think that passes the under God protocol. You know, we just said under God. Under God says that we're all equal. We don't consider somebody bad. Not if you're going to say under God. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Anybody else wishing to speak at open forum? Karen?
Karen Shepshowitz, Wanda Street. I want to talk about the lack of public transportation in Narragansett. It sort of piggybacks on what the previous speaker was talking about carbon monoxide and car fumes. But it is well known within the senior community that there's a definite lack of public transportation. I'm talking about buses and similar things right within the town in order to get out of town and go places. It's shameful. And it's particularly shameful in the evening and on weekends. And this is also an issue for young people who might be seeking employment and don't have a car or would like to conserve energy by taking public transportation. There was a transportation regional hearing at Narragansett, which was sadly very poorly attended. It was mostly consultants hired by the state to come up with a master plan for public transportation. It was almost pitiful because they're talking about, you know, what do we need to do? And we've had so many hearings, and it's known that this is a need that needs to be met. And I have issues with a town council that looks the other way when it comes to public transportation. It's getting to be that you have to be wealthy and have a car to live in Narragansett. And you can talk the Flex bus, or you can talk Uber, or whatever else you want to do. The Flex bus has very limited hours, goes to very limited areas, and I fail to understand why the town council, especially we have so many students in cars that are going to URI, why they can't somehow prioritize the importance of public transportation to our town. I mean, it gets to the point you can't even go now to Walmart or Home Depot or any place without public transportation. But I guess you don't care because no one's done anything about it. There was nobody there from the town council. Another issue that this piggybacks on is Teresa Tanzi was there, but there were no other legislators there. And I think with the coming up of the census, I strongly urge the council to ask for redistricting so we have our own representative and our own senator. And this is the time to start now.
So Karen, thank you. As far as the transportation, we do have a subcommittee that's going to be working on transportation, just so you know, so I just wanted to put that out there, but thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to see
Okay.
action rather than committees.
Okay.
It dies in a committee.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, anybody else for open forum? Town council members, at this time, is there any items on the consent agenda that you'd like to pull? Hearing none, is there anybody that would like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Any discussion? Any discussion from the public? All those in favor?
Aye.
Jill, did everybody? 4-0, motion passes. It's just about 8 o'clock, so we're going to have to move to the public hearing. I need a motion to open the public hearing on the application of a transfer of a alcohol beverage license on the Wheelhouse LLC. Wheelhouse Plat, IG Lot 214S to W.T. Galilee Corp., DBA The Fish House, 290-294 Great Island Road, Narragansett, Rhode Island. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So move.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, public hearing is now open. Is the applicant here?
Yes, right there.
Oh, and Mr. Callahan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see you all. Matthew Callahan, representing the applicant this evening, or at least the proposed new owner of the restaurant, William Tetlow. We also have the current owner of the restaurant here, Chris Bedard, and he's in support of the application, obviously. We can go into a long hearing about this. Mr. Tetlow is happy to answer any questions that the council may have, but the proposal simply is this is leased property down in Galilee, so it's not going to be a transfer of ownership of the land itself. The lease is going to be transferred to my client, and the building is going to be purchased with the equipment. Nothing will change, quite frankly, in the current operation. When Mr. Tetlow filed the application, he indicated that he may be interested in trying to move the bar around, and because it is a two-floor building. But he's not looking to do that now. He may at some later point come back and ask for some consideration from the council, but he's just looking to purchase the license and the lease, have the transfer of the lease, and just run the operation the way it has been run. We did review the staff report. Mr. Tetlow has no concerns with the conditions that were placed on the prior owner and the conditions that would be placed on this license. I'd like to bring Mr. Tetlow up and introduce you to him.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Put your name on the record, Bill, and raise your right hand.
I do.
Bill, you're not a novice at this restaurant business, I understand.
No, I've owned a restaurant previously, yes.
You owned a restaurant for 15 years and operated in Hopkinton, Massachusetts,
That's correct.
and you sold that restaurant back in May of this year,
That's correct.
and you're looking to bring your experience to Rhode Island.
That's correct.
And you understand that if the council sees fit to grant the transfer of the license this evening, that it will be to run the same type of operation which has been run as the Wheelhouse for a number of years.
I understand that, yes.
Do you have any questions of the council about any of the conditions that have been imposed upon the prior licensee?
Not really, no.
And you living in Newport now?
I am, yes.
Any questions the council would like to ask of him, he'd be happy to answer, I'm sure.
No questions.
No questions. I have the current conditions, and I'm just going to quickly go through them. No bar shall be permitted on the outside deck. Live entertainment shall be limited to individual musicians or bands, disc jockeys, or karaoke. No outside live entertainment and background music from the speakers on the outside deck, which music cannot be heard from the perimeter. No one under 21. Alcohol service stops after 12:30. And the food shall be sold at the time of alcohol beverage service in the family-style restaurant. Right? Any other conditions that, those are the current conditions?
Yes, we understand that, and they're certainly acceptable.
Okay, that's great. And then I don't have any issues as long as it's approval of local and state regulations and DEM approval as well?
Yes, we have to get approval from DEM with respect to the transfer of the lease.
And there's no pending sale of the property at all? Or is there?
No, it's
No.
state-owned property, so it's
Okay.
not going anywhere.
Okay, so I'm good.
Yep.
Anybody else on the council? Anybody in the public? Okay.
All
Like
these good
to-
people out here to support us?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do I have a motion to accept the transfer?
So move.
I'll
Do I have
second.
a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. Good luck.
Good luck.
I'll just indicate, Bill probably will change the name of the restaurant, but that's not a
Okay.
concern.
We'll be down to see it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, good luck.
Good luck.
If I may, with Galilee on one side of the bay and Jerusalem on the other side of the bay, I was thinking of the name Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. However, my minister told me I'd probably end up in hell if I did that, so I'm going to have a name of Captain Foggies, I think. That's gonna
Thank you.
Close second.
By Mr. Callahan. Okay,
Good.
I need a motion to open the public hearing to amend the text and mapping of Section 5 in the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Narragansett entitled Zoning and Expanding the Historic Zones for Ocean Road and Central. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, motion passes.
Good evening, Council President and members of the council. You know me, I'm Mike DeLuca, I'm the Community Development Director.
And Keith Lescarbot, Chair, Historic District Commission.
With us tonight, we have the majority of our Historic District Commission, whom you met just a little while ago. I'm going to take a moment to introduce them, and I'm sure they'll all be embarrassed since I didn't prepare them for this. On my left at the aisle is Bob Shields. He's our Vice Chairman and an original member of the Commission since 2010. Gaia Sharon, Kristen Connell, Moira Hinsa, and Judith Knauer. One of our members is not here today. This group has been working for, back up. Okay. This group has been working for 2 years now to bring this proposal to you. It has not been taken lightly or slowly, or quickly, I should say. It has been brought forward in a manner that has been very deliberative and thoughtful. I start off by telling you history is all around us because I'd like to remind everyone that we're in an historic building right now, and the town is committed to historic preservation by its ownership of the historic towers, the Canachet Clubhouse, North Beach Clubhouse, the North Beach Pavilion, and we even own a water tower that's hoping to get rebuilt someday. So, again, we've started 2 years ago. They conducted work sessions through the course of the years 2014 and 16. The individual members I've just introduced actually walked individual districts with notepads, with mapping to look at the individual properties and bring back their reports to the full committee. They conducted 3 workshops in the summer of 2016. Those workshops were also noticed to the property owners who live in those proposed areas. The notice was sent by first-class mail since it was not a public hearing, but those people were invited in. We had an average attendance of about 50 people at each one. And then you will recall earlier in this year, they held 2 workshops with you folks. Just last month, the Planning Board reviewed the application. I did not provide you with the memorandum, but it is on file, in which they recommended, they found the application in compliance with the comprehensive plan and recommended approval without addressing the individual properties themselves, whether the perimeters as proposed are exactly correct. The Planning Board suggested they would stay away from that issue and leave that to the council for their own determination.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. I'll turn it over to Keith at this point, and I'll be back up in just a moment.
Okay. So, track record over the last 5 years, we do provide both regulatory review and technical guidance for historic property owners seeking to improve their homes. The average review takes 1 meeting, about half hour to 45 minutes presentation. I should also mention that anyone doing can side their complete home, new siding, new roof, all types of repairs in kind with an administrative approval, which takes about 15 minutes to do and is guaranteed to be received within 24 hours. Just to speak on the difficulties. We've had 45 expedited reviews and 48 public applications with 100% approval rating.
Okay, just a few facts to put this all into context, and then Mr. Lescarbot will provide you an overview of the 2 districts we're looking at tonight, the Ocean Road District and the Central Street District. One thing to note, during our 2008-2009 original research, we looked into property value impacts because we had heard a lot of potential criticism. I had staff examine 51 studies of historic districts from around the country, not just in Rhode Island, not just in New England. And 47 of them showed enhanced or maintained property values. Only 4 showed any potential signs of impact.
Really?
So by and large, I think we can conclude that historic district zoning enhances or at least supports the current property values. The standards and guidelines that we have in place and that we put in place in 2010 are based on the Department of Interior's 10 primary standards. They are a document by which this board, this commission, I should say, conducts its deliberations and makes its decisions. A couple of the things you need to know, things like in-kind replacement, roofs and shingles, simple repairs, they can be approved by me without going to public hearing, and that's in the regulation. Not regulated, anything interior. Any interior work doesn't have to come to this commission at all. And as Keith already mentioned, average review is done in about 1 meeting. So now I'll turn it back to Keith. He's going to give you a review of the districts themselves and some statistics about them, and then we'll be back for final questions and commentary.
Keith, before you actually talk about Ocean Road and Central, can you just give the community an update on the tax benefit and the hardship overall for the people that are in the historic district? Can you explain those two just briefly?
Yeah, well, one of the concerns, obviously, although most of the 20,000 or so residents and tourists affected by this appreciate the beautification and stabilization of the neighborhoods. But surprisingly, there are some opposed. And one of their concerns is the cost. Does it cost more to renovate a home, to shingle it with shingles if it has shingles and things of those nature, than it would to do different types of work? So in that concern, we've come up with, we offer value engineering. Same people that help the town value engineer the restoration of the Sunset Farmhouse, the Kinney Bungalow, Canachet Club, North Pavilion, South Pavilion, Towers. Same individuals are available to all applicants to value engineer their project. And in addition to that, we have ways of doing things cost effectively. In addition to that, we now have a 20% tax credit. Okay, so if someone does $50,000 worth of work on their property, they get $10,000 off their property tax over a 5-year period, $2,000 a year. If you pay $2,000 in property tax, you'll pay no taxes for 5 years having done a $50,000 project, or 20% of whatever your renovations are total on the exterior work. So that more than offsets having to replace wood shingles with wood shingles or clapboard with clapboard and trim. We also are now drafting a hardship clause so that if someone just plain cannot afford to put wood shingles on when they take their wood shingles off, and the house is going to sit there and it's not going to be renovated because they can't afford to do it, they can only afford to do plastic or something inexpensive, then we're going to excuse them from that. Because the idea is that we'd rather save most of the town and not hinder those few that can't afford to do that type of work. So we've hit that cost issue head on.
Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, to get to the districts now. All right. So Ocean Road currently is proposed for expansion. There are some properties that, as Mike mentioned, there was a lot of research done in coming up with these properties. Staff went out and dated all of these homes. So not only architecturally significant, but our goal was to find high densities of older homes. So all the properties were dated, and they were, we tried to get the highest concentrations for these districts of older homes. Now, there are newer homes obviously sprinkled in within some of these districts. So we classified them as non-contributing, those homes that are less than 60 years old, okay? They do not follow the guidelines as a whole. They do not. So only the homes in the districts that are older than 60 years follow the guidelines. We have very specific guidelines so that as this organization evolves and new members come in, there are very specific guidelines that will keep those same trends of approval going, and the rules stay the same as members would change. So we have very, very specific rules.
So Keith, just identify the difference between non-contributing and voluntary so people understand the difference.
Well, voluntary really doesn't mean anything. This, it's like voluntary real estate tax. I mean, who would pay it, right? So voluntary doesn't really apply, but there's really not much there. But non-contributing means that a home in a district is not 60 years old. So it does not follow the same criteria or guidelines for approval as a whole as the contributing properties do, those older than 60 years. So the only thing we evaluate is what type, we want that property to just be done in the nature that it is. And if they want to continue, they have vinyl on that new house now, and they want to continue with that, that's fine. That's fine. We don't administrate that. So another criteria is that they are not detrimental to the property next door. So if they want to put up a multi-unit apartment, let's say, next to a nice Victorian, like let's say the Rodman Street incident, that would be detrimental, to those properties. So things of that nature. But as far as the work, they do not follow the guidelines as a whole. So that's the difference in the regulation of contributing and non-contributing. So although they might be in the historic district, because like I say, we went for the highest concentrations, but obviously there are going to be some new ones younger than 60 years sprinkled in within amongst those. So we don't expect them to go out and follow the same guidelines as the historic homes.
Thank you.
Okay. So you see the color and shaded areas here, those are the homes that are older than 60 years, okay? So you see we have a high concentration here on Ocean Road, very significant architecture, and all of that age. So you can see that all the colored areas are homes and architecture older than 60 years. So you see you have a high concentration there. So currently we have 46 properties in the existing historic district, and so we're proposing an additional 38, and this will bring the properties of 80, this will be a total of 84 properties in the Ocean Road district, giving us 60% historic concentration. And so we'll have 64% of homes that are constructed prior to 1965. So these are some of the properties. This is the property that was renovated under our guidelines. This property here was in pretty bad shape. The interior was almost demoed, was almost gutted, and you see, it's a fine example of a renovation sensitive to what was there. This is before the garage on Lady of Peace. This was a utility garage they had. They came to us, and again, we have no problem with change of use and things of that nature. We work with people. That's why we have a 100% approval rate. They turned it into an arts class studio type thing, and they were sensitive to the original design and have a very functional, adapted, and reused building. Here is on Ocean Road. This is the before, and then we'll see the after. Again, just shingles put back where there were shingles, and same mullion and discussions on the window layouts. So just by following these few points, we end up with something that's similar to what was there. So, we're trying to, preserve the architectural style in Narragansett. A lot of towns, Narragansett is very special. We have, we have a lot of towns that have beaches and And, you know, there's Bristol and Barrington and Portsmouth have beaches, and, you know, there's Oakland Beach, but it's not Narragansett. And one of the reasons is, in addition to the beautiful beaches, it's our beautiful architecture and the seaside character that we have that makes us so attractive and desirable.
Keith, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
In the beginning, Mike mentioned that at some point, the council would have to determine whether or not we want to pull a property out of a non-contributing district. What are the pros and cons of doing that versus just allowing all properties to be there?
Right. Well, you're probably, again, speaking of those newer properties that are sprinkled amongst the older ones. So, as I mentioned, we're not looking for those properties to follow the guidelines as a whole. Okay, so they can come in and do more of the same of what they have, no problem. They don't have to change their house into making it simulate an older building. They can do, you know, when they do their renovations, they can do more of whatever they have. That's fine as a non-contributing structure. So we've approved 100% of the buildings that are 60 years older. So we have even less stringent control or guidelines for these non-contributing properties. So essentially, the only reason why we want to keep them as part of the district as a non-contributing is just so that what might happen there might not be detrimental to the historic properties around it. So they can do what they like, but not adversely affect those older homes around them.
So to Jill's point, looking at Ocean Road, I just had a couple of questions on some properties on Wind Farm. There were
Right.
some properties, and I drove down there twice
Right,
over the
right,
weekend,
right.
that are not old. They're
Right.
not historic. I think 25, where Lori Kelly lives is very historic, but the other houses
Right.
surrounding
Very
it
familiar with those, yep.
have no history, with all due
Right,
respect to those
right,
people,
Yep.
and you can see them. So I mean, they just seem like I wasn't sure why they were a part of that, and I had
Right.
spoken to you about
Right.
them being sort of the non-conforming, so they would actually be in the district, but they wouldn't have the same application
Exactly,
to the rules.
exactly.
So it would be like, they're really not in it, they don't have to conform to the same rules, but they're in the area, is that?
Right,
sort of-
right. And the reason being is because, you know, they're like smack in the middle of the district. So if they were on the fringes, we could just blot them out. So they're in the middle of the district. So as I mentioned, you know, the staff did a lot of work to date all the homes, and our goal was to find not only significant architecture of a certain flavor, but a high concentration of those older homes. Obviously, we can't move homes around, so there are going to be some of those newer homes that are going to be sprinkled in with the district as a whole. So that's why we're labeling them as non-contributing.
Okay.
They do not follow the
So you
the
pull 'em out,
guidelines
you're
as a
just
whole.
labeling them.
Right.
Okay.
And so they're in the district, and, you know, time goes on. You know, these homes are, you know, that might be only 20 or 30 years old. You know, 30 years from now will be, you know, and even now we have modern homes even like on Ocean Road, we have the Casatino residence is a modern home, but it's historic because it's over 60 years old. So we call it the modern era. And so as time goes on, you know, 30, 40, 20 years from now, some of these properties will age in. So we have them in the district, but at this point, they are non-contributing.
Okay, and the ones that I was talking about on, off Ocean Road at
Would
the
be
farm.
non-contributing.
Non-contributing, so they won't actually, I
Right.
just want to make sure those 5, because when I drove down
Right.
there, I'm like, why are they in it?
Right.
But I can see they're sprinkled in, so I don't want to pull them out, I just want them identified as non-conforming.
Non-contributing,
Okay,
and that goes for any home within the districts that are
I
not
guess-
60 years old.
Right, so I guess you could do that
Any
during
home.
looking at the maps.
But obviously, Ocean Road is a very special,
Right.
you know, people go for drives, they come here. Not everyone goes and sits on the beach. Some people come just to take a ride down Ocean Road, and very special. And so we'd like to just help preserve a small portion of it. Yeah.
Thank
So-
you, Mike. I'm Keith.
All right, so now we go to Central Street. Again, very special part of town. It's where, you know, all of the high-end residences were in the Golden Age, and these were their homes. So it's currently, we have a historic district there. And again, we would have any volunteer properties now that are not 60 years old would be non-contributing, as we've gone over. So we're only proposing to add 9 new properties to the district, and these properties are located east of the existing district, along Central Street and Rodman Street. So that's just in that area there on the end. So the existing district now is all the way to Rodman, and then there you can see, and so it's just those 9 properties on the right side that we would be adding. And again, you can see the high concentration of older homes. All the colors are homes older than 60 years old. The darker brown being the older ones, but all of those of color are 60 years old. So just the white, plain white properties are not 60 years old. So you see you have a very high concentration. There's obviously a very special presence of the Pier District that we'd like to preserve in that area. So we have 42 regulated properties now. So by classifying, we would only add 9 properties that would be contributing, and then we would have, if you add in the non-contributing ones that don't follow the guidelines as a whole, you'd have 133 total. So we have 73% of the properties are historic, are older than 60 years old in the Central Street District. So very high concentration of those older homes. So this is this is the St. Thomas More, their renovation here, and very appropriate. They were able to, actually the round window on top was not there, and then they found it when they did some selective demolition on the interior. They located that window and brought that back. So another successful renovation. You see the carriage type doors. Okay, and it's just another before and then after. Again, in lieu of inappropriate renovations there. This is on Caswell Street, the 3 cottages. Now, we're not completely adverse to demolition. You know, we realize that properties have a life cycle, and these here were originally poorly constructed. They just didn't fit into the approved planning and zoning approvals. They had crawl spaces and piers instead of foundations, and no headroom on the second floor there. And this is what they look like after. So we allowed them to demo. You know, they came in with an engineer report saying, look, these buildings are not salvageable. And so all we asked them to do, you'll notice on the fronts, we just respected the Tudor trim that you see on the left, the raised dormer. The dome is in the center, and just to slightly respect the original properties that were there. So again, getting away from that cookie cutter effect. And I mean, those properties sold for $980,000. So they were, you know, very successful with our guidance there. Okay.
So on Central, just to, Keith, to summarize it, so
Yep.
Central is going from how many total properties? From what
We're
to
adding,
what?
we're adding 9, and then calling the volunteer ones would be classified as non-contributing. So 133 total.
And so, and those go from, just for people at home can kind of understand, going from the boundary just east of Boone Street, basically, then to
Right,
include
right.
basically Central Street to the water.
Right.
Okay.
Just only 9 properties being added to the broadening of that geographical expansion. Yeah, but yeah, and there are many you know, contributing properties there that are being.
And then the Ocean Road one is, we're going from essentially right now you're kind of around Wandsworth Street is the boundary, and then you're going from Wandsworth Street is essentially the boundary, and then you're going from Wandsworth to basically where the seawall turns at Monahan's.
Right, so the red line you...
Is that correct?
Yeah.
No, I know, but I think people need to, a
Right.
lot of people have trouble like with the map,
Right.
So we're going Wandsworth to like Monahan's.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, there's Monahan's there, yep. And that's, that's a very significant intersection there. That's where all the trains and the stagecoaches went, where the well is. That was a hub of the town. It's a very historically significant location at that intersection there.
I think it was really helpful when Jill and I went on the ride, too, to actually see the properties. I thought that visual was really helpful, so thanks, Keith.
Okay. So, in closing, I think, it's important to note that, historic districts work well for the town and benefit the community as a whole, with little inconvenience as we've gone over to the owners. You only look around the state, go through Bristol, Barrington, Benefit Street to see the positive impact that they have. And right now in Narragansett, we are poised. We have many properties that are in need of renovation. If you ride around, it's pretty obvious there's some properties that need a lot of work. And the values have increased dramatically in our town. And when you raise values, you automatically, have an effect of having more done because of those values. So, like I say, obviously this is something good. We have on our website, if you want to go in there, there's a 150-page report that shows how economically, environmentally, you renovate, you restore a house, you use one dumpster, you tear it down, you need 10 dumpsters. So economically, if you build a new home, most of it's material. Renovation or restoration is more labor intensive. So it's more benefit for the local craftsmen. But for those few that it's not for everybody, as we understand. For those few, we're only going for a 3% expansion. If you could put that big map up. And we'll have 3% total. We have one now, we're going for 3. We set up a good program here. It's the most operational, functional historic district in the state by far. By far. I mean, second place is way back. There's a whole different system here. We have house doctor consultants, we have tips of the month in the paper, tax credit, all consultation. So it's a very, very active and functional and user-friendly protocol we've set up here. So what I would say is to those that, that might not be in favor of this, for 97% of the time, we can, for the 97% of the town, we can do 100% of the time whatever we want, whether it be affordable housing, McMansions, modernize, demolition, whatever, a multi-unit, for 97% of the town. But just for 3% of the town, let's be a little careful.
Keith, could you review the tax credit again? Is there a cap on that?
The cap is $10,000, yeah. And that would be, you would take $2,000 off your property tax every year for 5 years for exterior renovations. So it's 20%. So if you do 50,000, it's 10,000, 40,000, 8,000, 36, so on and so forth. Right off. And that more than offsets buying shingles instead of clapboard, or clapboard instead of shingles, or using 1x6 instead of 1x4. So we've done that to address the cost issue. And then, like I say, we have a hardship clause in draft now where, if someone just can't afford to renovate their house and they want to put up a drop cloth or plastic siding or something to stabilize it, we're willing to make that concession so that these properties can be stabilized. And we understand that we can't have it all, And at the same token, those that are not in favor, they shouldn't be able to have it all either. 97% is a good chunk to do whatever you want with the town.
Keith,
Thank you.
I have just one more question, as Matt said, just to clarify everybody at home listening as well. We're not only talking about Victorian homes here, right? Can you
No.
talk, there was bungalows that were up there, I know there are apartment houses. Can you talk
Right.
a little bit about what
Right.
really it means?
Well, for instance, you know, that Caswell development, the 3 properties there. Could you bring that up again? That Caswell development, there were 4 houses there. And there was a proposal before that came, that someone wanted to tear them all down and put up a row house of apartments. And that's just not the flavor of Caswell with its small bungalows, and would have been, you know, detrimental to the neighborhood. So there's a lot of positive to come out of this. So if we could go back to the big maps again, Mike. So if we look at let's look at the town as a whole, because we kind of look at each district in its entirety. But if we look at the town as a whole, you see that's the whole town of Narragansett, right? And these are the districts. And do you want to put the expanded version in there, Mike? And so where you see the color, where you can hardly see those little dots of color, those are the areas we're trying to preserve, okay, amongst the whole town, okay? So the whole town is at bay, but just those colored areas, and we've identified the oldest, most significant. These districts all have a specialness about them. Ocean Road, we all know, that's obvious. The Pier, it's walking, it's the Boone Street is like a town, and it's like the Old West, it's a town in itself. You know, you're over there at 5 o'clock, people are walking out to dinner, and it's just, there's a vibe, and there's a motif of its own. So those are all the districts with all its expansion are those colored areas, and that big green on the left there, that's one property. So that's one property. So that's really, we're only looking to be careful with 3% of the town and our seaside character, and just, you know, not leave it all up to the beaches for tourism and eventually at some time, you know. So, yeah.
I just had a quick question. The hardship clause, is there financial parameters set for that, or are you still working on that?
Still working on that, but yeah, that would be a lower income,
Right.
you know, in the $80,000 range, you know, not broke, but lower
Right.
income. Obviously, we can't have someone come in who's doing a $500,000 restoration and say, you know, I can't afford to do wood shingles, you know.
Right.
But certainly there are properties that are being stagnant now and then in bad shape. And so if an owner came in and said, look, I want to clean this up, but this is all I can do, we're on board. We're very flexible, and as far as businesses, you know, we back right off. We realize there's a need for them to expand and to compete. And I mean, you can talk with the Coast Guard House people. You know, you've seen all the renovations that have been done there. They've surrounded that original Coast Guard house with renovations and additions, and so we've been completely flexible and realized that, you know, these people have to compete, and they are the you know, they are the backbone of our economic development.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council? All right, I'm going to go to the public. Anybody wishing to speak on the expansion of Ocean Road or Central? Come on up and state your name for the record.
Hi, Chris Scolia, Kingstown Road.
I think he has to be sworn in.
I do. Hi, Council. I'm here tonight as the chairman of the Narragansett Pier Residents Association. This year, we have 72 dues-paying households. Since most households consist of a husband and a wife, that's about 130 members, all of whom live right in Narragansett Pier, several of which live in these districts and in the proposed expansion areas, and all of which live within a mile or 2 miles from these districts. I'm sure that not every single one of our members will agree with this, but I believe that a vast majority of our members fully support the expansion of these historic districts. We've been communicating this all year to our members, and they seem to be very supportive of it. The MPRA has 3 goals, and only 3 goals: to improve the quality of life of our members, to protect the character of our neighborhoods, and thirdly, to preserve the natural beauty and historic charm of our neighborhoods. And we feel that the expansion of these historic districts meet all 3 of those goals. So again, thank you for your consideration, and we hope you will approve these expansions.
Thank you, Chris. Anybody else wishing to speak? Richard?
Yes, sir. My name is Richard Vangermersch, Vangermeersch, and I just want to speak to the statement that Keith made about, and Mike, history is all around us. For the last 9 years, I've been piddling in Narragansett history. And I'd just like to mention 3 items, and I'm assuming these would be in the historic district. I recently read a book on Herbert Hoover as president. Fascinating, but one of the key players in the Hoover administration was a Narragansett summer resident. In 1924, U.S. Representative from New York City, Ogden L. Mills, married Mrs. Dorothy Randolph Fell of the Randolphs of great fame in Narragansett. And they had a house off Ocean Road. What number, I don't know, but it was Fred Tester's house, Fred being the last successful Republican in Narragansett that he owned. And he had a big home on Ocean Road. He had to be a success. And there was still a full-length portrait of Ogden Mills. Ogden Mills was a huge player. He was the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury under Andrew Mellon, and then took over as U.S. Treasury Secretary during the troubled time of 1932 and 1933. He stayed on briefly without pay to get into the transition into the New Deal. Many of the New Deal laws were laws that Hoover had recommended. Big player. Also on Ocean Road, the house of Irving Fisher and Margaret Hazard. Irving Fisher was the most famous American economist from the 1890s through his death in 1947. And they had a summer house in the Hazard compound there. These are 2 giants of history that resided here in Narragansett.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, also, just 1 second. Mike mentioned Canachet Beach Club. It's time we got rid of this North Beach Club.
Thank you.
And went back to Canachet Beach Club.
We're still taking conversation on Ocean or Central, but we're going to take a 2-minute break. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion on Ocean Road or Central from the public. Anybody else wishing to speak on Ocean Road or Central Street? Please come up and state your name and be sworn in.
Marcia Boyd.
Oh, can you speak into the mic?
Marcia Boyd. I do. I strongly support the expansion of the historic districts. I live out on Ocean Road at the corner of South Pier in the expanded area. I think my own home is a non-contributory home, unfortunately, but I do strongly support this. I remember Narragansett when we had a town. I remember when we had hotels along Ocean Road. My only concern about this expansion is it's too little too late. I wish more of the old town were still here. I think this is a wonderful concept and applaud it and hope it goes forward and also expands in the future.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Shirley Easton, 14 East Pond Road, Narragansett. I do. As president of the Narragansett Historical Society, I just want to tell you for the record that our board of directors heard 2 presentations by the HDC and regarding the proposed expansions, and we did vote unanimously to support it. If passed, that's only 3% of the town buildings. I certainly agree with the women before me. As part of our history, these preserved districts will help with the keeping our wonderful history, our charm, and our heritage. So we're in strong support of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Carol Supernat, 64 Caswell Street. I do. I have a rather different perspective because I have a historic home in the historic district and have worked with the commission several times around things that needed to be done with my house, and I found them to be nothing but supportive and really very, very helpful. Initially, I was not in favor of the historic district, but I think the commission has addressed all of my concerns about the preservation of historic properties, not simply a rule book that says you must do what we say you must do. They're flexible and they're wonderful people to work with. So anyone who has a house that is going to become part of the district, I want to tell you that you'll get support and help from the commission. Not simply, you won't be getting a series of no's, you can't do that. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else wishing to speak? Come on up. Oh.
I do. David Winter, Boone Street. I find myself on a different side as usual. This whole mania for historic districts seems to me to be pretentious. It has a potential for ridicule. It benefits a very, very few people. And most importantly, Narragansett is going through the biggest change in its history, and it needs flexibility. And what this does, it puts another level of restrictions onto the planning and zoning restrictions that already exist. However, I am a big fan of the history of this place. When I think about the towers, and particularly Central Street, the house where Jacqueline Bouvier spent her summers when she was young, also has a personal historical import to me because that's where my father met my mother. And if it wasn't for that house, I might not be here to bother you tonight. And across the street, further down, there's a gazebo where the world-renowned Shakespearean actor Edwin Booth John Wilkes Booth's brother performed, and of course we have St. Mary's with Jefferson Davis's daughter Winnie in the stained glass window. These are specific places that have specific history. There are stories to them, there's information about them. Specific places, I think, can be historical. But just to wave a magic wand and say, poof, this whole area is historical, I don't think is beneficial to the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Good evening. William Landry. I'm a partner with Blish and Kavanaugh at 30 Exchange Terrace in Providence. I have a short handout that will make what I have to say much more efficient if I may approach and hand it out.
You can give it to the clerk.
I represent 4 families with properties designated for inclusion in the Ocean Road Historic District Extension. They are the Skeffington family at 252 Ocean Road, the Lynch family at 248, Essex LLC, which is the Carolyn family at 250, and the Triedman family at 244. All 4 of these properties are on that extension of the current Ocean Road Historic District northerly from the approximate area of the former Hazard Castle. They're all on the east or ocean side of the street, and that extension area goes from roughly where Anna Olivo Court begins, right next to the former Hazard Castle, all the way north to Monaghan's on the ocean side. Then it continues on the west side to include the condominium complex north of South Pier Road. I must say respectfully that the presentation that was made by staff understated by a wide margin the implications of a property being included in the Historic District Commission. The town's ordinance, Section 5 of the zoning ordinance dealing with historic zoning, mirrors the state enabling legislation and requires every property that's designated within a historic district to secure a certificate of appropriateness or its practical equivalent before conducting any type of alteration. Now, boards, historic district commissions are free to adopt policies on what's contributing and what's non-contributing. Those policies can change as quickly as the commission members change. They're not reflected in the ordinance, they're not reflected in the state law, and whatever aspirations exist today, and I don't question the integrity or sincerity of these individuals, but not one of my clients and not anyone in this room can count on that beyond tonight, and that's a fact. The reality is that before a property can be included in a historic district under the state law and under your zoning ordinance, it has to be determined to be historic. If it's not, and it can be historic in terms of how the architecture may represent a particular historical period of architecture. But it has to have one of those things before it ever gets into the historic district.
Thank you. You got to wrap it up.
Pardon me?
You're almost done.
Not quite, almost.
Okay.
You just need a minute. In this district, I'll tell you what my handout shows, and I don't have to spend a lot of time on it. The 12 properties designated for inclusion were almost entirely constructed after 1998. There's only 2 in this extension area that are any older than that. The white area shown on one of the slides showed that there are almost no historic properties in this area proposed to be extended. So if this area qualify, and I've shown in the photographs in my handout all 12 properties, they all have dramatically different architectural styles. One of them's still under construction. That's the most
Thank you.
recent photograph.
Thank you.
So, yeah. The bottom line, they also include commercial properties, including Monahan's Seafood Shack, that we would presumably have to be consistent with under one of the exceptions that staff described. There's no consistency to this, and we respectfully suggest that more thought be given into the individual properties that have been included in these districts and whether they're historic or not. The planning board said they didn't get into that, so nobody has gotten into that. And the comp plan says they have to be historic. So that function has not been carried out as of this time, and we think it should be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Third try is the charm. I'm Elizabeth Adams. My husband David and I live at 12 South Pier Road. I do. We purchased the home known as Four Gables in January of 2016. And referring to the previous speaker's request that homes being declared in an historic district actually are historic, I would like to attest that the history of our particular home, we came upon it by accident looking for a home to bring our grandkids to. Long-time history in Rhode Island, URI graduates. My parents are buried in East Greenwich. My dad taught at CCRI and so forth. Kind of coming home after being transferred to various places, looking for a place. We'd always wanted to find a place in Narragansett and happened to find this, only to find out upon touring the home that there were several offers due to its location, several offers made to the existing owner to buy it for the sole purpose of tearing it down and replacing it with something else. We had thought of buying it of looking for a home to purchase in a few years, but we made an offer that weekend. This home was constructed in 1898 by an architect by the name of Willard Kent. He is a Rhode Island architect. He has been written about in several books. He is known to have constructed several properties in Woonsocket and Providence, and it comes close to home because he was the architect behind the pump station in Peacedale, the Narragansett Pier Railroad Station, our own home, Four Gables, which was his home, his office, and he lived there until he passed away in 1924, Rose Lee, which is a home on Ocean Road, and this school building. He constructed the school building. So he has a definite history within this town. We wanted to renovate it. We knew that we wanted to do some things. What we've been doing is renovating it for a year and a half because though cosmetic changes were made, there was a tremendous amount of structural work that needed to be done. And this home is historic. It's an arts and crafts style, shingle style home, and we are trying to restore it in that vein. We love this house. Every time we come to town, we thank our lucky stars that we found it. We find ourselves so fortunate to be living here in Narragansett, and we applaud the efforts to expand the historic district and to include our home, because the homes around us, the entire town, is stunningly beautiful. There's nothing like it anyplace else in Rhode Island in our view, and we fully support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Russ Astor, 15 Fifth Avenue. Swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Yes, I do. I'm afraid I probably won't be as eloquent as that gentleman, but I did send a letter to the council earlier today. Patrick, thank you for getting back to me. That details pretty much exactly what he just said. These gentlemen, while I don't deny that they have their best interest in mind of everyone, they are missing many of the points that make this difficult and impossible for some people to deal with in this town. I would submit to you that it's unnecessary. The people that have spoken here today have spoken about many properties that are in the required historic zone. They've already been done. We're talking about ones that are not. We're talking about the people that have the small bungalow and want to stay in this town. They can't afford to do these things. That house that she's talking about is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm very pleased that she did it. But she spent 3 times what that house is worth to make it do that. And not everybody in this room can do that. And what you are in fact doing by passing this is making it so that people cannot afford to live in this town. That is what you're doing. The 3% that he is talking about is me. It's not 3% of everyone. It's the 3% of the people that are in this town that have to spend more money to stay in this town. It is not fair. It is unnecessary. The laws, the way that they have them applied, I went to the meetings and I spoke with these gentlemen. And what they said was they're applying it in this way. That's what they said. That's not what the ordinance says. The ordinance says they can do what they want. They can say you need wavy glass. They can say that tomorrow. There is nothing to stop them from doing that. Nothing. And that just means that you have to spend more money. There is no way for anybody in this town to stop this once it's done. If they come to me and say next week that I can't replace my windows like I've had happen to customers in Newport, in other historic areas, unless I put in wavy glass, I will not be able to do it. And it's at a whim of the people that are on the board. Now, I would say that the people on the board now are doing an excellent job. I love the way that the things have happened, and I believe they contributed to those things. But the fact is, there are not enough safeguards to keep it from going any further.
Thank you.
Sir, could you repeat your name for the record? We did not hear you.
Russ Dosta, 15 Fifth Avenue.
Thank you. My name is Donald Packer. I'm an attorney in South Kingstown, and I'm representing property owners opposed to this. But before I begin, I guess my first question is, are you actually limiting people to 3 minutes speaking at a public hearing on a zone change application?
I've gone over 3 minutes, and I'm trying to keep the clock so everybody can speak on the topic.
Okay.
So if you go over the 3, Donnie, I'm going to let you go.
All right. I don't know how long my comments are going to take, but I'm not sure it's appropriate to be limiting testimony at a public hearing. I represent the owners of 157 Ocean Road. It's 2 families. That own this property. There's 2 homes on it. I think if we're talking this triangle right here. You can see the 2 little white homes there. It's on that north side of South Pier Road, and my clients are opposed to the inclusion of the property in the expanded HDC controlled district. The obvious line of demarcation for this zone, although I do agree with Mr. Landry's comments that it's far-reaching in and of itself going down Ocean Road in that direction, would be South Pier Road. Crossing that natural dividing line doesn't make any geographical sense at all. The north side of South Pier Road, where they're trying to include these properties, also includes the South Winds Apartments and the Atlantic East Apartments, which are not included in the historic district, and we know why. But they directly abut the property owners that I represent. Those 2 properties north of South Pier Road, next to the Green Inn and this property, clearly don't fit the historic district, and clearly, in my view, would eliminate these other properties from being lumped into the designation of historic district zoning when there's a clear geographical line, street, South Pier Road, that could be an obvious boundary. These 2 homes are in need of substantial repairs. They are old, and we don't dispute that. They're summer homes. They were built as summer cottages. Recent estimates to just replace the porch on the wraparound porches on one of them and some siding repairs exceeded $80,000. And that's not a full renovation of these homes. We're saying you'll give us $10,000 over 5 years as a maximum against what we're looking at is $100,000 beginning to renovate if we had to renovate these homes. If the homeowners wanted to winterize these homes, the cost to repair and winterize far exceeds the value of these properties. A structural engineer also evaluated these properties and indicated that the cost of trying to renovate these homes far exceeded the value of these properties, and the $10,000 that we can get over 5 years is a pittance. I'd like to just make some comments relative to the condition of these properties. They were appraised in 2012 for purposes of estate planning, and it was appraised by Andolfo, and Andolfo made some comments with regard to these properties. Basically, he states in his appraisal that historically and presently, these properties have been utilized as summer cottages. The cottages are functionally obsolete, lack central heat, lack all customary and market acceptable amenities and improvements that are pertinent for a residential dwelling today. The properties have no insulation, no central heat, deficient kitchens and baths, lead and brass water pipes, knob and tool electrical wiring, multiple substandard sized bedrooms with no closet storage, no means of emergency egress from a third floor bedrooms, porous partial basements, dampness and mold infestation. These properties are not salvageable, and yet we're going to be subjected to historic district controls relative to, oh, maybe you can put a tarp over it and hang on until somebody else can purchase these properties and maybe try to renovate these properties. I also would like to go back quickly to Atlantic East Apartments, which abuts these properties. We're all aware that a substantial development was approved for for Atlantic East. Historic District isn't intending to include Atlantic East into the Historic District, which arguably could protect if these properties and the Green Inn are so valuable. Why aren't we protecting them by trying to regulate or control the Atlantic East property? They're not. Somebody's going to build a project on Atlantic East and completely obscure these properties from any view of anybody along Ocean Road. Excuse me. My clients also own approximately 2.8 acres in an R10 zone, which could yield 4, possibly 5 lots, or 2 or 3 additional homes, maybe more, for the family, an extended family who's trying to utilize these particular properties. The value of their property is going to be substantially impacted. I think we all remember 65 Gibson Avenue in Cantera Green. That property was in a voluntary historic district. The HDC had no jurisdiction over that property, and yet they wrote a significant letter to the planning board to convince that property, convince the planning board to deny that property owner an absolute right to divide his property. He had the frontage and the square footage to be able to separate the lot, and they opposed it even though they had no jurisdiction over it. Now, what can we expect when this particular piece of property with more than 2 acres comes in and wants to subdivide their property or build additional homes? We can fully expect the historic district is going to say, well, that lawn in front of those properties, you can't develop that property. And you're going to substantially, by including these properties in the historic district, affect the value of those properties. So we've strongly urged the council in evaluating this new Ocean Road district to stop the line at South Pier Road.
Thank you. I received some conflicting information or guidance as far as the public hearing at 3 minutes or not. So if people want to come back up and have more than the time that I give you, I'm happy to have that. So my apologies. So if you want to come back and you have more to say, I'll stop the clock. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My error, I was getting conflicting guidance, so I apologize, and I'm happy to listen to this important issue as long as we need to.
Kelly Donovan, 116 Central Street, Narragansett. Yes. Thank you. I support the expansion of the districts. I am, I think, in a little bit of a unique position with regard to both districts. First of all, I am in the Central Street existing historic district. I bought the home there in large part. We bought the home in large part because it was in a historic district. To us, it's an added value to the home and to the neighborhood. But a couple of years ago, we started some renovations that required the involvement of the Historic District Commission. We found them very easy to work with, no substantial delays, very helpful, very flexible, as people have said, even when the commission didn't necessarily know what we were talking about, in the sense of saying, I don't know why you want to do that there, but fine, it's okay with us. So we found it very smooth. It did not add time. Yes, you had to plan ahead a little bit, but it was not a problem at all. When we bought 10 years ago, it was an attraction in buying on Central Street. In my opinion, then it raises the values of the property, does not diminish the values of the properties at all. I also would like to say that my association with the pier goes back more than 60 years, and we're into 5 generations of Donovans scattered around here, one group of whom is in the existing Ocean Road district, and happily so. I am old enough to have seen and remembered the Atlantic House, the Breakers, even Shore Acres, the downtown. I survived eating breakfast at Johnny Main's and dinner at Moy Lee's. So not everybody can say that, and I miss the downtown, I miss the ghost hotels, and I really feel we should preserve what we do have left. Finally, we met a woman from California. We were out walking the other day down by Mathewson and Taylor and Ocean Road. She stopped us on the street and said, "This is incredible around here. Do you live here?" And we said, "Well, yes." And she said, "You're so lucky. I've never seen anything like it. It's beautiful. It's amazing." So realize it is a treasure, and people from other parts of the country, as well as from right here, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? David?
My name is David Archambault. I'm a Narragansett resident. I do. First, I'd just like to say, after listening to the attorney, before you make any decisions, you better make sure that you're abiding the right law. If there's something that you're not doing legally correctly, you should just take the time, make sure that you are doing it right. I am opposed to the extra laws being put on. I didn't say my address when I got up here because my house is 50 years old. And I don't want 10 years from now for you guys to come up and tell me how I have to take care of my house. I know people here that live in the neighborhood nearby who take care of their house. They try to make things look nice. And as a whole, Narragansett has done a great job. But the operation of a historic commission should be there to help. If somebody has a historic house and wants to take care of it in a way that continues that, there's a resource for them to go to and get help on how to do that. But if I own a house and you put me in a historic district and the house next to me is historic and is registered or whatever, and that happens after I bought my house, and I have the zoning right to put in a pool or something like that that's not historic, and now because I am now in a historic area, I can't do that because somebody thinks that that is a detriment to somebody else. You guys, you are putting too many laws on people who are, I've been here for 50 years. I went to school here. I was up in a little play right where you guys are sitting. I've been here. I came back here. I've been back for over 20 years. I was here for quite a long time. I only left for a short time. I love this town. I like the way it looks, but you gotta stop regulating. And everybody keeps talking about two other things I want to point out. One, that they're flexible. The board is flexible. And nothing against you guys, because you guys have been doing a great job. But as someone else said, you guys aren't going to be here for 30 years. And once these things are put in place, they're going to be able to do whatever they want. You say you're flexible. You shouldn't have the opportunity to be flexible. You should have set rules. And those people, there's the rule. They shouldn't have the ability to offer something to somebody and not someone else. You said if somebody's making $80,000 a year, they're making enough money they can afford wood shingles. What if I'm making 80 grand and I got 4 kids going to college? And now I have to spend $40,000 extra to put wavy glass in my windows. It's a historic thing that you could say, that's what you gotta do. And I would be bound by it. That's not right. It's just not. So, I probably didn't say half the things I was thinking of, but I got enough out, and I really hope that you guys check on the legality of doing what you're about to do before you vote yes.
Thank you, David. Dennis?
Dennis Lynch, Central Street. I do. And not being a lawyer, I'm probably not going to take too much more than 3 minutes. So
Well, apparently I'll give you all the time you need. And I'm going to come back to
So there's some, bleak pictures of the future here if you expand the historic district. There's another bleak future if you don't expand the historic district, and that is all of the development that's ready to go underway will be going underway next year or the year after that or the year after that. Ted Wright's old property on Boone Street, the demolition of a residence just 2 doors down from the Ted Wright's property, Robinson Farm. Anytime that a house is going down here, or if it were in the historic district, you wouldn't be looking at that urban apartment building that's on Rodman Street now behind Turtle Soup. So there's pluses and minuses of whatever decision you make. Seems to me that and so you're going to have to deliberate on this. If I were you, I would think about what's the data in front of you. And a lot of these arguments about this dark future could more readily be accepted if you didn't already have a historic district commission. We have a historic district commission. It's been in place for a number of years. I'm wondering how many times council members have been called with complaints from homeowners that have found the district commission, to be unreasonable, going to add expense to their homes. It's worthwhile noting that as you hear from all of the people that have actually worked with them, a lot of very laudatory comments. I actually went to a number of the workshops. I went to the public hearings, and they explained over and over again how they operate, how they operate now, how they're going to operate in the future. So the data says that they've done 100 properties. And if you go up and down Central Street and you look at the pictures, there's a lot of real tangible results that have come about as a result of having this commission in place. I'm really thankful as a resident that we have this dedicated group of citizen volunteers with expertise that can make our town better. And I think you or future councils will probably not bring on board new members that are authoritarian or despots or trying to do the wrong thing in terms of what's the best thing for the town and the homeowner. So, a number of years of really good results, real tangible benefits. Go around the streets and you'll see the improvements. The party house on Central across from St. Peter's, look at that today and what it's turning into with a lot of input from the Historic District Commission. So, yeah, a lot of things bad could happen in the future. We could have, a lot of bad things could happen if the next town council is really a bunch of really bad people up there. But you should look at least the data that we have here, the accomplishments to date. We're not doing a new commission. We're expanding it, and that was the reason for doing a much smaller plot in the beginning several years ago to find out what the response from the town would be and what the results would be. And I think the results speak for themselves, and I'm very hopeful that you will look at this very reasonable expansion as a benefit to the town and support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Elizabeth Noonan, and I represent the Green Inn Landing Condominium Association, whose properties are on South Pier and Ocean Road. So we're talking now about the expansion of the Ocean Road Historic District to these particular lots that I represent. They are specifically in Plat E, lots 27, 29, 30, 31, and 32. I come from a background of a history major and someone that has done a great deal of her professional work with historic adaptive reuse, and I can say from Westerly to Woonsocket. However, as Mr. Landry pointed out and Mr. Packer, one of the key things is that with historic district regulations, you have to be dealing with historic structures. Particularly for my clients, you look through and you look at these structures, they were constructed in 1987 for the most part, and the ones that weren't were substantially renovated. These do not belong in a historic district, period. And not only does your historic district regulations under which, or the enabling legislation under which you're acting, requires that historic structures be included, and I posit these are not. In order to pass an ordinance like this, you also need to make sure that it complies with the comprehensive plan, and even if it does, whether or not it's a taking of people's property values. And I say in the first instance that this does not fit into the comprehensive plan because these structures on these lots are not historic. And while they may be non-contributing under the analysis put forward by Mr. DeLuca and the HDC chair, non-contributing does not mean not regulated. So again, what we're seeing is a multiple layer of regulation, and you know, many of you know, I've spent many nights down here, as has Mr. Landry and Mr. Packer, at zoning and planning hearings. Now it's going to be one more layer at the HDC, which for my clients makes absolutely no sense. Not only were these structures from 1987 going forward, it's also a condominium association. You've seen the impact, you've seen the care they take of their property. So in this case, what I'm really advocating for is that, consistent with Mr. Packer, is that this South Pier Road should be the demarcation of the expansion. I know Mr. Landry may disagree with that, but for me and for my clients, that's what we're looking at, is that these structures that we're seeing are certainly non-contributing. In fact, they are just not historic and need to be excluded. And I would ask this council's consideration in carving those portions out, which I understand is consistent with the planning board recommendation to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak?
Speak again.
Yes.
Russ Astor, 15 Fifth Avenue. I'd like to just point out the eloquent speech of Mr. Lynch. Was quite eloquent, except for the fact that I can nearly guarantee that all of the properties that were renovated would have been renovated anyway. Regardless of the regulations, they are worth more on that road because of their historic significance. So the people that bought them would have done them anyway. Had nothing to do with the fact that it's in the historic zone. It did help in the historic area, but it didn't make it happen. These things that we're talking about, a perfect point would be the woman that just came up with the Four Gables. That is not in the historic zone, and yet she bought it, and yet she renovated it. Why? Because it made sense to her. That's the way America works. We do not need more regulation to tell me what I do on my property.
Thank you.
As I said earlier, I have a historic property. I also live across the street from the four ridiculously ugly cottages that were removed.
Excuse me, could you repeat your name again?
Carol Cerbernat. I still under? Yeah, okay. Those 4 old cottages that were falling apart, that were student houses, that made my life and the lives of everyone on my side of the street a nightmare, particularly in the summer. And along came someone to buy those houses, and there was a proposal to put up across the street from us. My entire side of the street is historic homes, Victorian homes. The proposal was to put up across the street from us a set of townhouses with garages fronting on the street, totally out of character with what we currently had in our neighborhood. The neighbors were not in favor of this. That went before the Historic District Committee. We went and protested and said this was not a good idea. And the commission agreed with us. And what we currently have are 4 beautiful cottages, each of which sold for over $900,000, as opposed to a set of row houses. Without the Historic Commission, we would have had row houses across the street. Just as without the Historic Commission, you have the apartment houses that are behind Turtle Soup right now. I must say that one of the things that I do worry about in Narragansett is the condoization of the town. The fact that more and more we see condos upon condos and upon condos as opposed to homes. People across from us are lovely. They have beautiful homes. It's not a set of row houses, and it's not student housing. And I credit the Historic Commission for much of that change. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Hi, Guy DeWardner, Watson Ave. I do. I'm not in the proposed expansion area, but I'm seeing it get closer to my property, so I figured I'd speak out. My property, as you guys might remember, is you stand up, look out that window, it's right there. I've been here all my life, part-time, full-time since the 80s. My family's been here forever. My grandmother's maiden name was Murchison. I get the history here. However, I'm one of those who opposes this historic district scheme. You must keep in mind that homeowners here did not purchase property in a homeowners association, and I request that you not turn my town into one. I get it, you don't want some doofus putting T11 siding up on a Victorian in town, but my town should not be in the business of legislating shame or taste for that matter. It is sad that a few individuals made some truly ugly mistakes, but this is overcompensation. Another point is that that kind of rubbed me the wrong way is that it may only seem like 3% to you guys, but it's still 100% of a potential pain in the neck for those in these districts. It shouldn't be up to a small group to make our town better. We should absolutely welcome a group that helps the town get better and make suggestions, but that's it. Don't take it upon yourselves to make the town better. That should be all of our jobs. The imagined added property value actually means very little to me. I like this town and my vinyl-covered Victorian era box, and will be staying here for good. So please stop this.
Thank you. Anybody else? John, and then you can come back up. I know I didn't give you enough time. Gotta take all the time we can.
John Miller from Central Street? No. I do. I think it was a medieval philosopher named Gropius who once said, a good lawyer is ignorant of many things, meaning that they can be smart on some things and not so smart on other things. I think My history in this town is that I arrived here in 1932 in swaddling clothes, and on 1940...
No, you take as long as you need. I'm trying to...
In 1940, we moved into a house on Central Street, which at one time was a farmhouse. But we had a good paper boy.
All right, let's stick to the topic.
What I wanted to say is this, I've been there off and on, I must say, but I would think that the thing about the Historic District Commission is that they're so forthcoming to people. Now, Dr. Housecare, there one time, I had a problem. I was a little concerned that the house was going to collapse, and Keith came over and told me how to fix it. But I don't see them forcing people to do anything. And the fact of the matter is, we're all so proud of being a part of that. That is us in those zones, and it's going to improve for everybody else. I think the small group that might want to reserve their options is not taking that into account. Do they really want to be Narragansett people or isolated citizens? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anybody else wishing to speak on Ocean Road or else, come on up. Yeah, that's why I'm bringing him back. I don't want to rush him.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. I just had a couple of
feel
things
free.
that I think I owe it to my clients to
Absolutely.
put on the record. We don't see this as a choice between doing nothing versus doing something. Our only request is to just be careful and make sure that these properties are vetted and only the truly historic properties are concluded. It took several years to get this done the first time in 2009. We think you got it right with the limits of the Ocean Road District at that time, and there were reasons why it ended where it ends, and those reasons still apply. And there are reasons to be concerned. The staff report, which is only one page, doesn't include a description of these properties, what year they were built, doesn't have pictures, and it says that we chose these properties to include because the new areas represent a high density of properties that are 50 years old or older. That's absolutely not the case with respect to the 12 properties in the stretch that I've been focusing on for my four families tonight. The handout, the other reason to be concerned, almost alarmed about what research went into this, the handout that I provided not only provided details with respect to the age of those 12 properties on the east side of Ocean Road and the years they were built, it also provided the corresponding information for the 12 properties on the west side of Ocean Road that are not designated for inclusion in the extended district. These are the properties across the street from my client's properties. And the average age of those properties is more than 50 years. So, I'm not suggesting that those properties should be automatically included, but I think some additional review really has to be taken to really understand why these judgments were made with respect to historic and non-historic properties. And I'll end by just reciting what the Historic District Commission's description of the Ocean Road Historic District is. This is the purpose of the district. It's described as a well-maintained, turn-of-the-century residential area important in the social and architectural development of Narragansett, a strip of land where houses greater than the average cottage were built by wealthy summer residents. That describes in spades your existing Ocean Road Historic District. It doesn't nearly describe these 10 to 12 homes that'll be added, almost all of which were added since 1998 and have a variety of different architectural styles. If that were all it took for a property to get included in a historic district, every 20-year-old subdivision in this community would be eligible to become part of a new historic district. And that just wasn't the intent of the state legislation or the local ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak? At this, oh.
Bill Gardner, Kinney Avenue. Yes.
He's still.
I just had a comment. I agree that we need to preserve the historical nature of our town, but the regulations and the benefits that accrue to being in this are exclusionary. So what we're saying is some retired person in Metatuxet that needs to put a roof on their house is going to subsidize someone else in a historic district to make sure that they have the right number of panes in their window, and that those panes cannot even be the plug-in panes. There's something wrong with that, especially since most of the testimony you've heard so far is that there was no problem with people renovating their properties in a historical fashion. People started this before that tax credit thing came up. So I'm not speaking against preserving the historical nature of our town, but let's remember when the historic district declined, it was Briggs Farm and Metatuxet and Petasquamsket and the Fishermen and Harbor Island and Great Island and the middle class and the working class and the immigrants that fished on our boats that kept Narragansett alive. And that's an important part of our history too. So why aren't we telling somebody that's had a cottage that they've lived in for 50 years in Bonnet that they're not entitled to the same rights and benefits of somebody that lives on Ocean Road? What is the real history of our town? It's not just the towers. And if we look at the examples of the town, the two most frequently mentioned historic buildings are Kinney Bungalow and the towers. You look at the towers, and it's hard to imagine it surrounded by blue and red flags and a sea of cars in 1905. And if you go into Kinney Bungalow, I don't know, has anybody been into Kinney Bungalow before they did the renovation? That building was beautiful because of its interior. And when the town took it over, they ruined the utility of the building. It was called Sunset Farms because you could see the sunset from every spot in the building.
Thank you. Well, I just want to keep you on track.
I think I am on track, because what I'm trying to do is talk about, we don't always have the right ideas when we're making policy. And we have to consider the whole of the town. And I think it's unfair to expect the rest of Narragansett to pay for the renovations of these houses, especially when the people that own them are doing such a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis?
I do. Dennis DePreet, Wildfield Farm. I've seen firsthand the good work that the Historic District Commission does and the staff does. I've been to the Historic District Commission meetings, and I've seen the commissioners try to balance the public interests with the private interests, with people having budgets, working on their homes, want to do things in their homes, versus keeping the appearance in the historic district that the town desires. So I don't have any issue with that at all. The neighborhood I'm here to talk about is Wildfield Farm. Today, it's in the voluntary district. And it's pretty clear to me why it's in the voluntary district. It's a small private road. The homes that are in there aren't visible from Ocean Road. It's unlike the other areas in Central Street in Ocean Road that the public could see. And so it was put in the voluntary district when the district was created. It's the same neighborhood that the council president and Keith were talking about at the beginning of the meeting. And I think I heard Keith say that the homes in there would be non-contributing, and if Wildfield Farm was at the edge of the district, he could cut it off, or lob it off, I think he said, but it wasn't, so that's why he made them non-contributing. But I think a correction's needed on that. If we look at the map, it is in the edge of the district. The abutting properties are not in the Historic District Commission, so I would respectfully request that the maps be possibly revised.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Mr. Goodrich? And then the young man in the back, you're next.
Donald Goodrich, South Pier Road. I do. Right. Like Mr. Dupree before me, I've seen the good work of the Historic District Commission for a lot of years. When I was on the zoning and planning board, people used to laugh because they used to say this all the time. Special cases make bad law. And I know Mike, and they tell us it's only 3% of the town. Well, you know, that's pretty special if you're part of that 3%. And I don't know if that's the right percentage or not, but it certainly sounds to me like it's pretty special. I'm here to support, I live at the Green Inn, I'm here to support that we have 13 people. We had a council meeting, they unanimously voted that they don't want to be part of this historic district. Why is that? Because if you notice the design of the Green Inn, we try to, the developers try to create that cottage style. And in the last 2 years, the homeowners spent over $600,000 to continue that. And unless there were 7 votes to do something crazy, it's going to continue long before. And this idea of non-contributory, well, you know, 1987, I'm not going to be around, but 30 years it's going to go by pretty fast, and all these non-contributory buildings are going to be in a zone, and then everything else changes. And my last point has to do with 41 years in planning and zoning. I've seen a lot of people come and go on the boards I served on, and some I were glad to see go, and
Oh dear.
and I don't know what's going to happen 5 years, 10 years. None of us going to know. But the fact of the matter is that we have this wonderful board, but it's not going to continue because it's going to have to change. So if we create a law today that it's going to affect people's lives even 10 years from now, I think we need to really think about that, because it's hard to go back and unpeel the orange. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodrich. Anybody else wishing to speak? This young man in the back. I think this is our final speaker, maybe.
Hi, Jesse Pugh, 20 South Trail. Do I need to? I do. So I actually came here for the dog ordinance.
That's coming up.
Yeah, that's fine. That's for next time. But just sitting in the back, I'm not in the I'm not in the historic zone. My house won't be in the historic zone, I don't think, at least in the near future. Kind of sat back there, not really that interested.
And now you are.
Now
It's
I
beautiful.
am, so
It's
it's
good.
pretty eventful. But So David Archambault spoke a few people ago, and I actually decided, I was unopinionated on this topic, but he has some genuine points. I think what he said sort of hit me. I think that the historic, the society has everyone's best intentions in mind. We all love the old homes here. I grew up here, moved away, came back. I hate when I drive by and see houses that have been torn down, rebuilt. I think, that's not really beneficial to the town. But what is being proposed, I think there's no way around it. It's definitely unfair for people that are not in the zone and will be in the zone. You're changing the rules of the game, in the middle of the game. They bought a house not being zoned, now it's trying to be reclassified. So the one thing I haven't heard being discussed is any sort of grandfather clause. So it seems like the big issue here is having homes torn down more so than shingles and siding and windows. You don't want to see an old home being torn down. That's probably the worst case scenario. So if you own a home now and you're grandfathered in, I feel like you should be able to do what you want with your home. You can't afford, higher upscale upgrades, possibly, to stay within code, or whatever the code would be. But if you sell the house, the new owners understand that what they're buying will be classified as a historic home in the zone. So to me, that seems like a compromise. You're not changing, the rules of what someone bought. I know there's precedent for historic zones in towns throughout the country, and I'm sure there's legal precedent, but what we're discussing seems like borderline illegal, possibly, and if not, at least to the point where you're gonna have legal battles, with individuals. A compromise seems to be a grandfather clause, which is my opinion. I haven't heard it being discussed tonight. I'm not sure why, but maybe it was in private. But anyway, that's kind of all I have to say. So.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak on the historic districts of Ocean Road or Central? Stanley?
Stan Wojciechowski. I own a property, 46 Fifth Avenue. I guess it's hard for me to speak with these. No, you got to swear me in. Yes, I do. It is hard for me to speak with these fellows have done such a fantastic job in the past, and I'm sure they would for the rest of their lives continue to do well. But the issue is liberty, justice for all, liberty. I want to preserve everyone's right to do what he wants to do with the property, and I'm sure most people are not going to do anything to violate the historical value that their property may have. And I'm going to be the last one to change anything. And you don't see too many of these fantastic homes, the contemporary type, coming up in Narragansett on Ocean Road. It's all barn-like. They're all like that. So I see very few people. I think they only realize it's nonsense to vary from the traditional bungalow issue you have throughout the town. And so there's not really a severe need to violate our liberties, our property rights. So let's just leave it the way it is for now. And let them be an advisory committee. Like I say, I wish everyone to go to them to get advice to what they want to do with the property as advice, but still preserve our liberty. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Anybody else wishing to speak on the historic districts of Ocean Road and Central Street? Seeing no others, I just want to make a comment. I want to thank everybody for their input tonight. And certainly, you have given the council some things to think about. And, I was here when we first implemented the historic district several years ago. I, too, am a little concerned about some of those properties, like Dennis's property, that doesn't really have that historic value, and sort of wondering why that one would really be there. I rode around yesterday and I paused and thought about that myself. So I think that you've asked some really good questions. I think that the council has some things to think about. And so we want to thank you for your passion and your interest, and at this point, I'm looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, you can say anything you want.
May I interrupt for a moment, Madam President? It may be more appropriate at this time to hold the hearing open because, as you know, this is the first of 3. We'll have another one on October 16th and another on November 6th.
Yeah, so
That's what I would recommend, is
okay,
that we
then
hold
I'll
it
take the recommendation of the solicitor and do that. So we'll keep it open. Patrick would like to say something.
Yeah, like the young man in the back, I thought everybody was here for that dog ordinance. So, back in '69, Narragansett introduced a leash law. Never had one. Introduced a leash law.
Okay, so.
Now, hang on a minute, I got a point, I promise you.
I just want to keep him on the
I
historic
promise you I have a
commission.
point.
I see
Madam
an analogy
President.
coming.
All right, okay.
During the summer, you can't bring your dog from May 15th to September 15th. Now they're kicking around. You have to keep your dog off until October 15th. Again, this is encroachment of government. It may take 40 years, but the natural order of government and ordinances and committees is to increase. I don't want to see 50 years from now, we have a historic department where we have to add another wing on the building. So, but the intentions of this committee are honorable, and I'm on board with many of these points. But I believe it should be voluntary with tax incentives across the board throughout the town. If you have a 50-year-old log cabin or in Bonnet Shores, and that's considered historic, then that homeowner, if the house is worth $200,000 and not $2 million, should have the same incentive. So with that said,
Thank you. So, Steve, I'm going to make a motion to continue the public hearing. So do I have a motion to continue the public hearing?
So moved.
All those in
I
favor?
wanted to say something, too.
yeah,
Is that okay?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a big philosophical divide here between the community character and protecting the community character and private property rights. And so we're going to have that divide. And so I've been listening very intently. It's been very helpful, actually, tonight, all that we've heard. I wasn't on the council. That was just before I first got on, when the historic districts were first created. A couple things. It was very small, and it protected the most historic properties. So I think we don't want to lose sight of the history piece of it. This is Historic District Commission. This is about protecting the most historic properties. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today, and I said, it's more the Victorian era, it's more the older houses where there's a deeper concentration. And he came back at me and said, well, what about the bungalows from the 40s? And I said, well, everybody's line is going to be different, right? Everybody's line as to what we're trying to preserve historically is going to be different. So I think that's part of going to go into my analysis, is what's the concentration of properties that would be historic. And my second piece is, this is a big jump. We talk about 1% to 3%, but it's actually a doubling. Okay, so the government program that Patrick's talking about, that I worry about the encroachment of government and increase of government as well, is that it's worked effectively because it's been small. So more than doubling the number of properties is a concern. And then the other thing I want to caution people on, there's certainly properties where there's a high concentration of historic properties that probably should be included, and we should expand the historic districts to include them. But this is not an end around the McMansion problem or the rental property problem, right? Don't think that because you increase historic, this is historic properties that have a long-standing architectural and contribution to the history of the town. So I get a little piece of that, and I've cautioned some people who have advocated for this on that. I've said, this is not that. That is about decreasing height limits. That's about other things, for unrelated. That's a different battle, and I don't want to end around that, say, oh, listen, we can't stop that problem, so let's do it via historic district. So that's kind of the pieces of the puzzle I'm looking at. I understand the philosophical divide, and if we do what you guys did a few years ago, where I know you didn't expand it to the extent that was originally thought, you know, that's kind of a middle ground, but that's my thoughts at this time. So thank you, everybody.
Thank
Very
you.
helpful.
Jill,
Thank
do you
you.
want to say anything?
There's a lot to think about, but we have 2 more to come, so I'll reserve until after we're complete.
Okay, so we need a motion to continue the public hearing.
All in favor? Yeah.
We
I
have
made
a
the
second.
motion.
All in
I second
favor?
it.
Yep.
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. Then, could we take a look at moving number 19 up? Can you make that motion, Matt?
I would like to move item number 19 to the top of new business.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Susan, the reason, oh, you
Chief.
gotta read it.
Okay, motion number 19, a motion to approve hiring 1 probationary patrol officer at the Narragansett Police Department and approve the hiring of a 2nd officer conditional to the anticipated resignation of a Narragansett police officer who is applying to a city police department. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Discussion. You know, I just want to say, because I saw this motion, this is an existing position that we didn't fill, so this is what I'm talking about, not coming before the council, so I completely support this, and sorry you had to wait to bring it to the agenda, but I support it wholly.
And the reason I moved it, I know there's people waiting for other issues, but I know the chief has another thing that he needs to get to. So, but in terms of, I just want to express strong support for this in light of many issues. We talk about the rental problem that we have in town. We talk about the partying that goes on and the encroachment on quality of life. And we did get a pretty stinging defeat on the 4 unrelated. I don't want to paper it over. I feel very strongly that was I disagreed with the decision to throw out the 4 unrelated. We fought very hard for that over 2 years. But what do we have to do to roll up our sleeves then to fix the problem? Because now the 4 unrelated is off the table during this appeal period. Increased enforcement as we've done over the many past years, and the way that you do that is your police force needs to have this extra individual who would be on what's called a swing shift, which is a late night shift, which others can speak to if the chief wants to come up or Jim wants to talk to that. But that is why, one of the reasons that I'm supporting this.
Thank you.
And the other reason to that too is when we're not having the academic year, we can use this person at the beach to be able to combat some of the issues we've had over the last, that the managers so eloquently put out to us, so.
Any discussion from you, Patrick?
Yeah, we're at 39, correct, right now? And we're going to stay at 39, or we're adding 1? Okay.
Any discussion from the public? Stanley?
as you throw that college problem with all the parties and all that stuff in there, it just seems more logical, rather than a full-time person, that we identify those specific times during the year that you need extra help. And at that point, I would like to just call in police from everywhere, give them the opportunity for overtime, this week overtime. So I have a list of 20 police persons that you can have come in on one Saturday or one Friday, or whatever it is, to fix the problem. To have a full-time, why do we have to have a full-time person? So typically you might be overstaffed during the non-party problem, if you will. So I thought in the past, we've got one of the highest police-to-person ratio in the state, I thought. I'm not sure. You might check that. But I'm saying, I don't think we're taking advantage of part-time help. Let's put it that way. Part-time help, I think, would fit very well here, because I think the police and everyone is very well informed on what days or what weekends are the problem, and let's just hire the staff that we need. Police we need, whether it's South Kingston, State Police, whoever it is. Hire them rather than hire additional full-time persons.
Thank you.
Sean can speak to the swing shift, but it's on the weekends that we have the problem in the wintertime.
And again,
We
it's-
talk about enforcement, we hear from people, just like the speaker that just spoke, about increasing enforcement. This is what that means. The reason we have a police force for a small town that's so large is because of the partying problem, and you know that. So let's stop the madness and do what we need to do. And because we lost on things that certain constituencies fought strongly against, like the 4 unrelated, we now have to increase enforcement because there are these problems in the neighborhood. So that's why I don't want to add more people to the government. This is a need of the town, and it's a very strong one.
And you would think the landlords would be in favor of this as well, because this is actually going after the people that are causing the problem.
But it's not new, and it's one we never filled, correct?
Correct.
Correct, so it's not
Well,
new.
It is new.
I'm looking at the chief, is it?
It is new.
Yeah, I do, because I want to make sure, it seems like it was a position that we didn't fill from Mr. Chief Canoxy, right? That's what I thought, because just want to be clear on that for the public.
Well, you're both right.
Oh, here we go.
In the situation when Dean Hansi retired December 18th, 2015, that's when we lost the 40th officer and we dropped down to 39.
Right.
We have the 40th position, but we're not funded for it in this budget year.
Right.
So it would be an increase in funding to pay for the 40th officer.
Can you explain the swing shift as well, Sean?
Yes. What this is going to allow me to do is to, from September to May, to put a second person on my swing shift, which is 7 at night till 3 o'clock in the morning. This is the busiest time for us. And having that second spot will mean overlapping shifts, so 7 days a week, you're going to have that swing shift there, which is going to give you the sustained presence in the neighborhoods and the sustained enforcement. Just give you some statistics on this. 70% of the ordinance violations that we write happen between 7 p.m. and 3 a.m., and 51% of our custodial arrests. So this is, we're very busy, but it's within a particular window, and it'd be very helpful to have that full-time officer there, because you're constantly going to the well to ask officers to work overtime, and we work a lot during the summer, and then it's a very busy fall, and I think what people in the neighborhoods would appreciate is to have that sustained presence. And then during the summertime, I would be able to fill a day swing to have an 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. officer work to deal with the day shift issues, such as filling marine patrol, patrolling the beach, filling all the festivals that we have in road races and such.
Thank you, Chief.
So, Chief, I hate to put you on the spot, I really do. You're doing a hell of a job. Sheesh. Really need this extra officer, huh? You
It
think
would
you
be a
believe?
big help to us.
Chief, Council President, you mind if I address that question as well?
No, not at all.
Okay, so we're very stingy, the town is very stingy with putting on additional personnel, creating positions, hiring people. We don't do it without a great deal of study. So the chief came to me about a year ago, I've been here 15 months, and talked about this. We studied it for a year. I took it out of the budget initially. After the statistics the chief brought to me, and now that I have a greater understanding of the town, I fully support this position. As a private law enforcement officer, the swing shift that Councilman Mannix is talking about, these are the most dangerous times, the most busy times, the most active times for any police officers. It's usually like that time frame from like 8 at night till like 4 in the morning. That's what this shift is. It's a 7 to 3 or an 8 to 4. Am I correct, Chief? Is that what the
7 to 3?
7 to 3. That is the most busiest time for a police officer, universally, no matter where you go. That the chief spoke to me about. He has one person on that shift now. If we have two, they'd be teamed up together. There has been a change in this town as far as what increased enforcement. It is better. It's not perfect, but it's better. I can say that unequivocally because I was part of trying to solve the problem years ago while I was on the state police. It's much better. It's a direct result of the enforcement and the pressure that the Narragansett Police Department puts on not just student rentals, this is a tourist community. Stanley, to go back to your question, this is not disproportionate to this population. In the winter, it might seem like it is, but it's not. In the summer, it's definitely not. You could use more police officers. You can't use part-timers to patrol the town. You could use them for special details, but not on a patrol function.
when you weigh of the foreign related being overturned with the issues that are going on now, where we're using this officer on the swing shift, and the union concessions that they graciously made so that we could use this police officer on a different shift in the summer when they needed more, I think you'll get the most bang for your dollar with this 40th person. I fully support it.
Thank you.
If I could also add in as well, just a reminder, in 2014, when we initially went to the 40th officer, there was an increase of rental registration to bring the funds in to pay for that.
Right.
So, you know, that wasn't, we only had that 40th officer for a year before we ended up dropping back down to 39.
Oh, boy. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
While we have both chiefs here in the events that happened late last night, I just want to say thank you. You know, you're the first responders that would go in and run into a problem that we'd all run away from. So seeing you both tonight, I just have to say thanks. I know the town does as well. Thank you, too.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Come on, guys, give me a hand.
Okay, all those in
Respond.
favor? Aye.
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 4-0, motion passes. Okay, new business, number 10, a motion to introduce, read, pass, and accept as a first reading an ordinance and amendment of Chapter 82, the Code of Ordinances in the Town of Narragansett entitled Waterways.
So move.
Second for discussion.
Second for discussion.
So Susan, I'd like to amend it to be a
Discussion.
amend it to be a motion to discuss a possible first reading of the same
And I'll
ordinance.
second that for discussion. So I put this item on, and I'm going to explain a few minutes about it because it was quite passionate from the public. So I had a coffee hour and had some residents come, and some of them were beachgoers, and they had brought up the issue about the weather being so beautiful and that people are swimming and sitting on the beach, and, you know, maybe could we look at that date? And I said, well, absolutely. And then I had about 1 million other emails from the dog lovers, so here were the beach lovers. And then the dog community came out, and I'm a dog owner as well, and they were, you know, we like to swim in the water with our dog at that time, and we don't want it changed. And as I have always been a councilwoman that has listened to the people, this is an issue that was brought up, and some of the beach people thought it would be something to talk about, and then all the dog lovers came in and they had their opinions. So I did want to discuss it. I had happened to be on the beach on September 16th when dogs were allowed, and there were a lot of beautiful dogs. One of the things that the ordinance does say that the dogs should be leashed, and there were a lot of dogs that weren't leashed, that were running around, and some were actually fighting with others, running on blankets. And so, you know, for me, I don't, you know, care. We can discuss it. The public can discuss it. We can keep the ordinance as is. And I think we can, you know, or change it. But one of the things that came up was the leashing, and a lot of people wanted to not change the time. So I'm open for hearing what the people have to say, and the dog lovers and the beach lovers can come forward, as well as the council. Again, we'll see how it goes. We won't take a vote on it. You know, I just want to discuss it because it did come up several times, and I forwarded the emails to my colleagues, and that's all I have to say about the dog ordinance at this point. Anybody from the public want to speak? Anybody from the council?
Yeah, I actually do.
Knew it. Going to the dog. Going to the dog.
He's a dog lover.
So I wasn't going to speak about this one either, but
I love that you're so interested. You came for this one.
Well, I came. All my friends told me to come, and then they left. So
Yeah, right.
I'll do the speaking. So yeah, I don't really bring my dog to the beach that much, but I think, you know, changing the ordinance, I think would be somewhat reactionary, you know, based on the weather we've been seeing this year. Not every year, you know, it's so warm going through September into October. I think there's more people at the beach maybe the last couple of years. So you're starting to see people say, we don't really want to see the dogs until later. But, I mean, the beaches are closed. There's no lifeguards. It's not run by the town really at that point. I don't think you want to see regulation by the town when the town's not really providing services there. One thing that I would say could possibly be a carrot for the people that are looking to, you know, push it back would be better signage possibly around the beach about what the rules are. I know when I've gone, I don't really even notice those signs when you walk in. So maybe if it was more visible, brighter, more clear about the leashing rule, and maybe even just the leashing in general. That is the rule now, correct?
Yep.
That
Correct.
they should be leashed, and you see a lot of that not happening. So maybe just focus on that part and less about the pushing the date back would just be the only thing I would say.
Enforcement.
Also,
Enforcement.
yeah, well, enforcement. Is there are we allowed to talk back and forth for this?
Not really. Not really. You have 3 minutes this
All right,
way.
all right. Well, I don't know. I don't personally even know if it's a fine if you let your dog go to the bathroom and don't clean it up. I'm not sure if that is the case or not. But maybe if that was more clear as well.
think
Even, people aren't going to probably.
I think there is a fine.
Okay, so people probably don't feel like they're going to get fined because there's no one really there to see it. But again, if that's more visible in the signage and the signage is bigger or brighter, at least you're doing something. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Anybody else?
Hi, Gail Shields, Earl's Court. I don't have a dog.
Oh.
I don't even really like dogs. However,
Okay.
however, I do like the beach. I go to the beach after September 15th, and I see dogs running loose. And they run and they can, start interacting with other dogs that don't want them to, or children. And, it would be so simple, just at the beginning of the season, to start enforcing it a bit so people get the idea, you're not supposed to, you have to have your dog on a leash, and fine them. And don't add more restrictions, because dogs on the beach are fine if they have a leash. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak?
When do you lose the lifeguards? Are they after Labor Day?
No other discussion on the, yeah, they're going after Labor Day.
Labor Day.
Okay, so at this point, the discussion of the dogs is over. Do you have something to say?
No, well, yeah, really the only thing I wanted to say is it's just like, it's Narragansett. We lose the summer residents, right, the tourists, we get the students come in. So this is the same thing. It's the end of the season, now the dogs are back. But I think more importantly, we just had the recommendation from Steve Wright's committee, which I am liaison on from Parks and Rec. And the Parks and Rec committee did not include this. So rather than putting it on an agenda, respectfully, Susan, I think if you felt that way, just bring it back to Parks and Rec and ask the board, the advisory board, which is why these people devote so much of their time to things, to take it into consideration is all. So maybe we would want to have the advisory board from the Parks and Rec take a look at it, is my recommendation, kick it back to them. It's what they devote their time freely for, and they did not include it in the recommendations that were presented.
No,
I also spoke to Steve Wright about it, and his concern was enforcement. I mean, I think Patrick's right. You have to have the leash laws there, and we just need to enforce it.
Just hire
Maybe
another
Mrs.
police
Shields is going to
officer.
be out there to come help us find people, so.
So it did come up a little bit at the beach workshop. It came up at the coffee hour. It's an ordinance review. It can come from council. It can come from Park and Rec director. I did talk to Steve about it, and it has been an issue over the years. At this point, it's a discussion. I don't even think it needs to go to Park and Rec. Anybody can bring up an ordinance change on the council. So at this point, if no one else has anything to add on the discussion, we'll just keep.
I got to get in on this.
All right,
Go
go
for
ahead.
it, Patrick, yeah.
Well, if we're going to change the ordinance, I think as soon as the lifeguards leave, we should bring the dogs on. The tourists are gone, bring the dogs on the beach. So right after Labor Day, dial it back to the day after Labor Day, dogs can access the beach.
Thank
And
you.
believe me, I've met a lot of tourists, and I'd rather share a blanket with some of these dogs than some of these tourists. So.
Matt, do you want to say something?
Yeah,
about the
actually, it's
agenda?
something too, as we're thinking about, we're going to be bringing on a new solicitor. I want to ask all my colleagues this. I tried to do this last term. When there's an idea like this, Susan, put on something about a motion to direct the solicitor to put on an ordinance about dogs, or motion to direct, because when you open your packet, especially my first term, on a Thursday, and there's a first reading of an ordinance because one of us has gone and done that, I just think it's a bad practice. I think we should all kind of make the promise, if we have an idea, put it in the idea phase first and then kick it to the solicitor. Because if we go, each one of us goes individually to the solicitor, we're spending a lot of time on the solicitor. And it might get voted down or just discussion purposes. Now, I know this is only a date change. I get that. I'm not an idiot, right? So on this specific one, I get it. But that's still this discussion. We could have put on as a discussion to instruct the solicitor, a discussion to refer to a committee, and then if all the council says yes, the dogs are running wild on the beach, they can't. It's till Thanksgiving that we're not going to let dogs on the beach. Then we're ready to put the ordinance in the first reading. Everyone, the public knows about it. It's not this whole thing where the public, you get all these emails today, right? And so I'm just asking you guys, I try to do it that way. I can't say I've always done it, but Ann, pack me up here. I think most of the time that's how I've done ordinances, right? Motion to refer to the solicitor.
And
Right, Ann? Yeah.
Sometimes they come from the staff, sometimes they come from the council, sometimes they come from the committees. They come from different places, right? So we just want to make sure that everything.
I'm just saying the idea part of
right.
it. Make it say, there's this idea that I'd like to put an ordinance in, motion to instruct or motion to discuss. And then when the first reading comes up, it's already been discussed for a few weeks, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, because in this case, it sounds like that we would, Patrick is in agreement as far as the dog leashes. We might not even have to have this discussion. And cats, he's not anti-cat. We wouldn't have to have that discussion.
Okay, any more discussion on the dogs?
Gloria Roman, Wheatfield Cove Road. It seems like there's a lot of discussion going back and forth about dates and this and that and the other thing. We have an ordinance. It says May 15th to September 15th.
Correct.
What we need is enforcement. There needs to be someone there who says, no dogs during that time, and before that time and after that time, every dog has to have a leash. And when dogs aren't on a leash, then people need to be fined. So maybe we need to use this 40th police officer.
It's a good conversation, isn't it, Gloria?
To come and enforce the law and not go crazy trying to change our laws.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very good. Never wasted time when you talk about, if you discuss it, right? Excellent, okay.
Madam President, the law says they are either leashed or under the control of the owner.
Yep, that needs to be looked at, yes, so thank you. All right, we're gonna close the discussion and move on the agenda. Thank you, Ann.
Forgot about that.
Motion 11, under new business. A motion to authorize the town manager to sign the net metering credit sales agreement with Kiersgan, I guess, LLC for the proposed solar energy facilities at Rose Hill Superfund site.
So move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions? Was a pretty lengthy
Just had a-
solar energy. That's a
Yeah.
20-year, right, Jeff? Is that 20 years that I read? I wanted to make sure I understood it correctly.
The current draft agreement is for 20 years. However, there are negotiations with Kearsarge going on to potentially extend it to 25. The reason that this is before you tonight in a draft form is that all three partners, URI, South Kingstown, and Narragansett, are trying to sign this or get authority to sign this document during the month of October. South Kingstown is going to be meeting next Monday night, a week from tonight, and one of the key issues that they're discussing will be whether there will be relief from tangible taxes. If there is relief from tangible taxes, which we think will pass, then we may be able to extend the contract for another 5 years with Kearsarge. So that decision won't be made until sometime next week. Anticipating a busy night on October 16th with our next town council meeting, that's why we put this before you tonight. So we're asking you to authorize Jim to sign it, but there are still a couple of moving parts that can't get solved until South Kingstown addresses the tangible tax issue next Monday.
So the only thing for me is the 20 years, every time we look at a contract or a commitment with, just, is there there a mechanism in which you review it and, can you get out of it? I mean, that just seems like a long time.
It is, and in the solar industry, that's typically the only way to encourage or to get a developer to agree to commit that kind of money. We're looking at the developer upfronting $5, $6, $7 million to build a project, and then the developer has to own and operate it for that period of time, and we get energy credits back. If you do a shorter term, and I know this, Steve has had some experience with solar energy contracts as well, you generally don't get any bidders. They need that length of time to amortize their construction costs and before they actually start to make money on it.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, I had a question. The 1.5 million of annual savings, what percentage do we receive? 1/3 of that? What's the breakdown of percentage of that 1.5 million?
No, the savings is going to depend on what our electrical load is. Of
Right.
the three partners, we have the smallest load. Now, when I'm talking about electrical load, I'm talking about all of the municipal accounts.
Yep.
So town hall, DPW, the treatment
Correct.
plant, et cetera. So it's based on a percentage of that.
Right, percentage of use.
We're anticipating over the life of the contract, over the 25 years, somewhere between 1.6 and $2 million worth of savings. Now, that depends, obviously, on what the standard offer is every year for National Grid.
Everybody
as well.
understand that? Yeah, that's, it says 1.5, but is it 1.5 over 20 years?
Over
For
20
us,
years.
our cut.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify that.
Yep.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the council? Anybody from the public? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Number 12, a motion to approve the purchase of 11-inch Monroe half-inch express snow plow and truck hitch from Donovan Equipment Company, Inc., utilizing the National Joint Power Alliance contract in the amount of $14,050. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second? This motion is from, do I have a second?
I'll second.
This motion is from Mike. Anybody?
Yep.
Question?
Nope.
From the public?
We're gonna need this to clean up all the dog on that one.
Oh, Patrick. All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. 13, a motion to approve the purchase of an annual service contract for the Access Pro V5 computer assist mass appraisal software by Patriots Property from Northeast Reevaluation Group LLC in the amount of $24,200 to be billed to the fiscal year 2018-19, and to authorize the town manager to sign the contract after review by the town solicitor. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Do I have any questions?
And it appears, Jim, it's cheaper than Vision, is that correct?
But cheaper, he said, yes.
Cheaper. Yep.
Cheaper,
Yep.
yes.
Yep.
Anybody from the public? Any other questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. Number 14, a motion to waive the current policy and to authorize the use of the miscellaneous repair and construction service contract with George Sherman Sand and Gravel, Inc., to complete various drainage projects in the total amount not to exceed $57,800. This motion comes on from Mike. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? From the council? From the public? Mr. Gardner?
I just have a quick question on the wording. If it's individual projects, they wouldn't need a waiver if it was under around 50, right? So is this a bunch of projects, or is this to waive various projects bigger than 50?
Up to 57.
So you're gonna switch the contract to 57.8 for everything? Or
No,
are you?
it's a
or is
one-time
it a
deal. It's a one-time deal. Right, Mike?
One time, one project?
Yes.
Nope. Various projects,
One
one-time
time.
approval.
Various projects, one time.
So you don't need to even waive it? if
Listen,
it's
I just want to
various
get these
under
roads
50,
done.
Yeah.
I just want to get this drainage and roads done, man.
Okay,
People are
thank
getting
you.
tired of bouncing
Okay.
around.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0, motion passes. 15, a motion to approve a one-year contract extension for general construction services for all departments with Abcor Restoration Inc., Company, Inc., at their quoted and adjusted bid prices for a one-year period ending July 21st, 2018. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Any discussion from the council? From the public? Stanley?
I was so happy to see there was 3 quotes on this. That was a plus. The only thing I see is, and I think I asked it before, a painter painting, $53.67 an hour for a painter. Now I understand the state Rhode Island prevailing wage, and the state is messed up on. I can't believe this. $53 for a painter.
You better go clean those brushes up,
This,
Stanley.
I don't know, this is ridiculous. Is there any way we can get out from under having to abide by the state prevailing wage situation? Can we just vote not to participate in that?
Nope.
Because obviously, they're crazy.
They're gonna take us away.
Who pays that? Only the government pays that.
That's right.
This is nuts.
Thank you, Stanley.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments?
They're good painters, Stanley. Damn good painters.
All those in favor of motion 15?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, motion passes. 16, a motion to approve the purchase of one new 2018 Ram 5500 4x4 Horton 623 ambulance from Greenwood Emergency Vehicles in the total amount of $276,423.85 using the HGAC buy program. This comes in from Scott. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Scott. Yeah, I got a couple questions on this one. So we got.
Yes,
I
sir.
guess it's in line. We had $1 million for that ladder truck. $250,000 for an ambulance. Okay, I guess that seems plausible. Are there any grant money kicking around here, or
Well, you know.
is there any way we
for-
can
for
hold
vehicles-
off?
For vehicles, no. As you know, as you're aware, the
Yes.
Assistant for Firefighter grants,
Yes.
vehicles are extremely tough
Right.
to acquire. We just were very fortunate to get that ladder truck grant.
Right. Is there anything coming up on the horizon we could just kind of get by and see if we can't get a grant somewhere down the road, or?
Anytime he sees a grant, he goes for it. I know that he's one of the
Yeah,
best
at
grant.
this current juncture, to secure another vehicle grant, it's really
How about FEMA?
far-fetched
Is
for
there
us
any
to be able
FEMA
to
money
acquire
out there?
that.
I know it all went to Puerto Rico, but is there any FEMA money or anything?
For vehicles,
Yeah.
not that I'm aware of, for grants.
Jim, what do you think? Any
Thank
money
you,
kicking
thank you,
around?
Scott.
So I knew this would come up, and Stanley, I'm gonna probably answer your questions before you even get to the podium. So this vehicle's 14 years old.
Yep.
I personally saw this vehicle at South County Hospital, and the first thing that came to my mind is this is an old emergency vehicle.
Right.
It has 87,000 miles, about 8,600,
8,600 hours.
86,000 miles, has about 8,600 hours on it.
yeah.
So look at the hours.
Yeah.
An average vehicle for 100,000 miles has about 3,000 hours.
Right.
So if you do the numbers, the math, this vehicle really has about 300,000 miles on it, if you want to.
See, back in 2003, if the lady that was here tonight talking about idling the vehicle, we wouldn't have this problem.
That's right. So,
If anybody's paying attention out there.
I spoke to the chief about this. Once again, we're very stingy with what we're not trying to slip one under the rug here. This is a 14-year-old emergency vehicle.
Right.
Now, would anyone in this room want to put, with really 300,000 miles when you do the math, would anyone in this room want a loved one to have a stroke, a heart attack, whatever, and be picked up in a 300,000?
Absolutely not.
No. This town really needs this as a very old emergency vehicle. I support this 110%. So I would not it would not to get to your level without a lot of scrutiny from me.
Oh, boy.
In budget, did we, I recall, we budgeted this for capital?
Yes, we budgeted
Yes.
this in capital. It was vetted out in.
What was the
you know,
exact number we
workshop.
budgeted?
We budgeted 285, and it's
That's right.
come in under budget at 276 plus. And it goes through a buying council that competitively bids out the vehicles.
HGB, yeah.
Chief, could you just go over the advanced life support system that's in this vehicle? It's a state-of-the-art system, and
It's state-of-the-art. There are new changes that occur with vehicles with specifications that you have to upgrade your vehicles. Normally, you get about a 7-year user life out of a rescue, and a lot of that is related around the technology that are built into the rescues. Things that require medications that require refrigeration now, medications that require heating now to carry on the trucks, as well as internal electrical systems that require everything really to be plugged in. It will carry onboard computers. It will carry a lot of equipment that will allow us to function in ALS capacity.
Is there a generator to be self-sufficient?
A generator, no, but I believe this one's going to have an inverter where we'll be able to use that as a power supply support source. And it's important to know that when the new rescues and new vehicles come in, we get a much more extended wear out of them in the 7 years, and that's because when they come in new, we'll rotate out the existing primary rescue out to the other outlying stations. And so that, along with a really good preventative maintenance care with DPW, and rotating them out, we get a more extended life out of our vehicles. That's why this one really has lasted as long as it has, but it's outused its usefulness at this point.
Right.
Chief, this is the one we put a lot of money into this the past year, haven't we? Is this the one that was breaking down quite often, and we had to put emergency repairs in it?
Yeah, it's inevitable. I have a list of repairs, but Mike's probably even got that committed to memory. But, you know, it's at a point, what do we do? Whether we keep putting in more and more money to sustain these vehicles, or do we invest in a new vehicle? And we can sell this vehicle, unlike the ladder truck with the AFG grant. It had to be decommissioned essentially, so it couldn't be used for emergency purposes. We can sell this to another agency who wants it anywhere.
Within the U.S.?
Some of that money. In the U.S.
Really? Okay. The electronics and the new technology in this new ambulance, is it something 6 months we have to upgrade it or reinitialize it or keep dumping money to update the technology?
No, we've built this to specs that should last for quite a while down the road. And also with this, we spec'd out a power cot and power load system. That in itself is $43,000 total package. That was an option that we wanted to put in there. We thought it was really important. With the power cot, power load, there's a lot of lifting of patients, loading patients into and out of the rescue. And we believe that this will help to eliminate some of those injuries that can occur, especially those repetitive type injuries from lifting, reaching, loading patients into and out of the vehicle. So that's an investment that came with it.
Chief, you mind if I just comment on that? That's probably one of the biggest selling points of this vehicle. Firefighters, one of the most common injuries in the firefighting industry
Lifting people.
is throwing their back out lifting big patients. And this has an assist. The amount of money, not just this town, but every town and city spends on disability pensions, injured on duty for firefighters getting injured, legitimate injuries, is astronomical. This, even if it saves us once, it would pay for itself.
And there's no question, we're all getting bigger. That's for sure.
Yep. So even with that option, we're still under budget, and we've got a pretty good price on it.
What's the condition of the other two ambulances? That's my only last question.
The condition of the other two, I thought you might ask me that. The other rescue is it's a rescue one is a 2012 rescue, and the rescue two is a 2009 rescue.
Okay.
So the 2012 has about 75,000 miles plus on it right now with about 5,500 plus hours on it.
Right.
It's used constantly. So when the new one comes in, we'll rotate out that Rescue 1 really to District 3. It'll become our new
Right.
Rescue 3. The new rescue will become the primary rescue. And we rotate trucks out like that.
What about
as
the
they-
2009? How many hours we got on that?
The 2009,
It's under budget.
the 2009 has at least, these are not the newest updated numbers, but it has about 4,300 hours on it, 57,000 miles on it.
Right.
It's a,
Okay.
Okay. It's under
2009.
budget, we discussed it at the workshop.
Yes, I know, it's on the budget,
Yeah, I'm
but,
just wanting to
you know,
make that
I
for
mean,
the
you're
record.
spending, close to 300,000 for an ambulance. I think people need to hear this. I don't care if it's 10 o'clock at night or whatever.
Me either, but I
keep
think
in mind, these rescues do bring in revenue. For every patient we transport,
Right.
we bill for.
Right.
So we bring in between $350,000, $400,000 annually in EMS billing revenue. So they are out there earning money,
Right.
believe it or not, as well.
Yep, okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Yep.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. Motion 17, a motion to schedule a workshop with the Town Council and the Zoning Board for the purpose of introductions and to discuss town projects and current zoning laws in Narragansett. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I put this on, it's come up, just different things that have come to the council this term. Some of the projects we've delayed because we needed a little more understanding of them. I think it's a great opportunity to sit. Some people have not met the members of the zoning board. I'd like to schedule this, and I'd like to do the same with the planning. I think it's healthy dialogue when you have the two boards below the council that work so closely with us and make such big decisions. So I just think it's a good idea. There's been a number of projects that have come up, and I think that there's been some concern on the projects, and I think it's a good time to sit down and just get to talk and meet with them. So I'd like to schedule this one before a council meeting. I was trying to think before, maybe like in November, like a November 6th date or November 26th, just prior to a council meeting, just to get together with them, introduce ourselves, make sure everybody's, if you have any questions.
Can we get them together, planning and zoning, in one meeting?
Well, I think, I actually reached out to Terry today for planning. He's gonna reach out to the planning to get a date, so I'd rather
Right.
do zoning as a group and then meet with planning.
I've been thinking about this today a lot, like going back and forth on this. I mean, I see the point, but a lot of times when we do this as a council, we have a message to whether we want to have a performance review with our solicitor or performance review with the town manager, or we need an update on something from somebody we appoint. I don't know if this will be productive, to be honest with you. And I've been going, and the reason is, if there's a zoning board issue that's come up, and you've met the zoning board members, you know them.
I know
Right.
them well.
That's what we do, right? I mean, that's our job. If we appoint them, we kind of we're supposed to watch them in action. I just feel like, Patrick and Mike have different philosophies of zoning. You and I are kind of in the middle. The zoning board members aren't all on the same page. I'm concerned getting all those people in the room. I don't know how productive it would be. I see where you're going.
Yeah,
I get it.
I mean,
I feel very well versed in how they are, because when I hear from the public about an issue, I go and sit in and watch it myself.
I do the
So,
same.
yeah.
I'm offering this opportunity for people that, on the council that might not know the zoning. I thought it would be good for introduction. It's certainly good to talk about some of the projects. So I think healthy dialogue with the board would never be not productive. So, I mean, I've heard around town just different projects and stuff. I think it's important to begin to understand what projects meet the zoning laws that they apply. So, I mean, again, I don't care. I think it's an important opportunity for some of the council. I've been here 10 years, 15 total as an elected official. I know them all well. I attend the meetings. This is more for a reach out for the rest of the council who doesn't really get to go or know them. So,
Could we maybe have the chairman of each committee just do a presentation and give us an update, a summary of what
Yeah, I
they've been
mean,
doing?
Jim Manny is the.
During a 20-minute presentation, I mean, we let the lady that doesn't want to idle my truck. I mean, I think we get the planning or zoning guy in here.
Yeah, so we could have the
And then we're there, we
zoning.
can do it during the meeting, everybody will be here, and I don't have to
Oh, you mean?
take an
so-
ambulance to another meeting.
So we could do it right here?
Sure.
Sure, yeah, I
Let's
don't
do
have
a
any problem with
presentation.
that. It's fine.
Update what's going on in the town and the plan.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be, I just really thought about it. I'm like, I think you understand what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're thinking. The question is, do you want?
Yeah,
us to
if you did
keep
it that way, you could have maybe
Yeah,
see
that's
with the
fine.
zoning board chairman,
Yeah,
see if
you
it
can do
works.
bullet points and just give us an update.
Update us on a public
So it could be a
presentation.
workshop or a presentation.
Yeah, I would, it just, since
But
this
a
is my
pre-
wheelhouse
A
now.
presentation isn't interactive, so my intent is for it to be interactive. So if Jim Manning comes up, Jim Manning, and just talks to us,
Well, we
he's
had-
not.
Presentation and discussion,
Yeah,
and we do
discussion.
that with
Yeah,
some
we had
of them.
town projects
So we
going
can.
on. That's a
Right.
category.
Yeah, I
So
would-
that can be.
I mean, the
consi-
bike path that
That
happens.
can be considered a workshop on November 6th.
Yeah, but
There he
that's-
comes up.
Our solicitor has something.
Now,
to
yeah, I
say.
would just caution that exercise in not discussing specific projects.
Right.
You know, if the council wants to discuss the actual zoning ordinance or problems with the zoning ordinance, like we had, when I first started, the 12.4,
Right.
there's specific issues within the zoning ordinance, but I would caution any of the presentations to not get into a specific project that might come before the
Okay, so
board.
Because they're an independent board, right?
Yeah, so I
Right.
wouldn't be in favor of that. I mean, the intent, and again, we can vote and it can fail, the intent was to sit with the zoning board, to have introductions and talk about philosophy or law. So if you're not interested in meeting with them, so be it, we can just call it to a vote. Because I don't,
Okay.
it doesn't make sense to have Jim come up and talk to us and not have the entire board dialogue. I mean, that was the intent.
I understand.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So-
And we wouldn't have to announce it, right? It'd be a public hearing, right?
This motion is for a workshop prior to a council
Right.
meeting on November 6th or the 26th, to
Okay.
get together with them in a
All right.
small setting and a workshop.
All right, I'm on board, Susan. I'm on board.
I can't see how you couldn't be, actually.
Yep, I'm on board.
But that's just, okay, so I forget how it goes when it's 2-2, it fails? Yes, okay, so I'm going to call it to a vote. All those in favor?
No.
No.
Okay, so the vote fails. We will not be having a workshop with the zoning board. Okay, and the number 18, a motion to appoint or reappoint 3 individuals to the library board for trustees for a 3-year term to expire on October 1st, 2020. The reappointments are Gail Shields, Ann Sullivan, and Gloria Roman. Do I have a
Gail Shields.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. Ann Sullivan?
I move to appoint Ann Sullivan.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. And Gloria Roman?
Move to appoint Gloria Roman.
I'll second you, although Mrs. Shields is saying don't do it.
All those in favor?
Before that, just remember, right, whatever goes on with the future of the library, we're all going to have to come back together again and work out where we go, right? So, okay, there's going to be some disagreements, but anyway, thanks. All right.
Those in favor of Gloria?
Aye.
4-0, motion passes. I just have an announcement before we adjourn. The Narragansett Town Council meeting on October 16th, we'll have the meeting at the Narragansett High School at 245 South Pier Road, Narragansett. There will be no live broadcast for PEG access for that meeting. Also, I just wanted to ask the solicitor for the historic districts on the 16th. We have Earls Court and Boone, so we'll continue business at the auditorium.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And we can't get Cox to live do that for us? There's no way?
I checked for a week and a half on that. There is no, what I was told by 2 IT people, it's impossible because there's no cable, no fiber optic that runs to the school.
Susan, just for the record, I would be opposed to moving it then.
No.
Our meetings are always here. I just want to say that.
Me as well, it's our council
And people
business
at home
meeting.
are going to not see it.
The majority of the people in town will not see it.
It will be recorded and aired the following day.
Yeah.
Not the
That's
same
all.
thing.
I know, but-
Just for the record, I'm totally opposed
Just
to it.
letting you know that.
We have more people who watch at home these meetings than are in the room, and I would not move. It's advertised for this location. It's always been there.
It's
so.
just setting a
Thank you. I'm
precedent,
going
too.
to adjourn
It's-
the meeting.
One more, Susan, before you cut me off. It's also setting a precedent for other groups to also advocate for such a thing, and it's just not fair to the rest of the town.
There- It's not an agenda item. It was just an announcement. The meeting's adjourned.